Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Fuzz, you're not, and today I've listened to every Coldplay song and I'm going to rank them from worst to best. A little bit of background on my relationship with Coldplay's music. They were the first band I really fell in love with in 2010, 2011-ish. I listened to all of their albums all the way up until Milo Xyloto came out. I got Ghost Stories and it was the first CD I ever threw away, so I kind of fell off of the Coldplay wagon at that point and hadn't listened to anything past Ghost Stories until I made this list. So any criticisms I make of their music aren't meant to be mean-spirited or malicious. It's just my thoughts on the music. When I say every Coldplay song, there are a couple of exceptions. I'm not including covers, which includes Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas and 2,000 Miles. I'm not including any alternate mixes, which includes Lovers in Japan, Osaka Sun Mix, Princess of China Radio Edit, Hypnotized EP Mix, or Overtura, which is the Music of the Spheres album trailer. As far as live songs go, I've only included songs that only have a live release. So if a song was released on a studio album or as a single and also has a live version, I didn't include it. That includes Shiver, the Joe Wiley Lunchtime Social version, Speed of Sound live, Fix You live from the Netherlands, Lost At live from Chicago, Life in Technicolor 2 live at the O2 London, Everglow live from Spotify London, Viva La Vida from Spotify London, Adventure of a Lifetime from Spotify London, Yellow from Spotify London, Christmas Lights from Spotify London, or Champion of the World from NPR's Tiny Desk. I'm also not including remixes, and these include the Princess of China Invisible Men remix, Paradise Tiesto remix, A Sky Full of Stars Hardwell remix, True Love David Rossi remix, Adventure of a Lifetime Matoma remix, Hymn for the Weekend Sieb remix, Up and Up Freedo remix, Midnight Giorgio Moroder remix, and Midnight Kygo remix, Aliens Marcus Dravs remix, Orphans Muzi remix, Talk remixed by Junkie XL, Francois K. Dub, or Thin White Duke, Higher Power remixed by Zhu, Tiesto, and Alexander, and Something Just Like This remixed by Alesso, Rehab, Dimitri Vegas and Like Mike, Don Diablo, Jai Wolf, Armand Hammer, and Tokyo. There's also one song I'm not including from a studio album, which is Globe Emoji from Music of the Spheres, because it's not really a song, it's just sort of crowd noise and like garbled robot speech. So I didn't feel fair to, rank it on its own with a bunch of other compositions. So with those all out of the way, let's get into the worst song. Number 158, Something Just Like This. I feel like it's a pretty easy choice for the worst Coldplay song because it's less of a Coldplay song and kind of just a Chainsmokers song that Coldplay is on. It uses the same 3-chord rhythm that every Chainsmokers song uses, just back and forth from a 4 to a 5 to a 6 and back. The melody does the standard modern pop thing of like holding on the supertonic note. It plays with the dynamics in a very cheesy and obviously constructed way to sort of manipulate the emotions of the listener in a very standard pop way. And at the end, Buckland's guitar solo, and I can't blame him, it sounds so completely bored and devoid of energy. They just have him like playing the main melody for a little bit, and then he goes into his own little solo bit, but it sounds completely bored. Number 157, Reign of Love from Viva La Vida. This is the hidden track that plays at the end of Lovers in Japan. It's just this like 3-minute, piano song with this like sweet production over it. It's really, really boring and completely inessential. Number 156, Color Spectrum from A Head Full of Dreams. This is the first of several interlude tracks that are kind of low on the list because they're not bad interludes, but I'm ranking each song as a song, and on their own they do not stand up. This one in particular is just like ambient synth with human speech over it. There's nothing that stands out here. Number 155, Kaleidoscope, also from A Head Full of Dreams. It's like someone's reading a Rumi poem over this really boring instrumental that sounds totally preachy, completely cheesy, especially when like the vibraphone hits come in. It feels sort of like a Kickstarter thing. It's not a pleasant listen. Number 154, Miracles, Something Special from the Kaleidoscope EP. This has got to be one of the preachiest Coldplay songs ever. There's a point where he starts like name dropping famous people who have struggled with something before, as if to like imply his own struggle and your own struggle as he projects it onto you in this like totally fabricated, like, feel-good song. There's a Back to the Future sample in here, which is just so unbelievably stupid that it's painful to hear. The instrumental feels just like standard, feel good pop music. And they have Big Sean in there, and he does enough of a job with what he's got, but what he's got is this really boring beat to work over, and he sounds really bored as a result. It's not pleasant, and the acoustic guitar that comes in that's low in the mix really sells that it's just sort of a cash grab of a song, sort of riding the wave of feel-good pop music. Number 153, Sparkle Emoji from Music of the Spheres. This is just another ambient interlude. There's a couple points where it feels like it's implying like a flat 7, and that makes it a little bit interesting, but there's not. It's just an interlude. Number 152, Ringed Planet Emoji from Music of the Spheres. This one is the intro track thing, another interlude, but it's got like this like rising noise that like swells up at points that is honestly kind of nice to listen to, and there's a couple like plucked bass notes that ring really well in the mix. Number 151, X Marks the Spot from A Head Full of Dreams. I didn't write down in my list what Coldplay song this was the, hidden track on, because it's a hidden track. It's on the second half of Army of One, but I just looked at the Coldplay Wikipedia, and apparently this song was written in 10 minutes off of a beat that the producer already had, and just sort of slapped on the album as a last-minute addition. It sounds like it. Chris Martin's voice is so one take. Like, it's really rough, low in the mix, no energy, totally fucking lifeless. It's like, I don't mind that it's not a rock song or something, which is what he said people wouldn't like about it. I don't like that his vocals are so tired, and the beat is kind of boring. I really hated it on first listen, but I still don't like it now, but it's not as bad as I thought it was. It's still pretty boring. There's a part where he goes, "My heart ba-boom, ba-boom, boom," and that just made me fucking so sick. Number 150. I'm not going to try to pronounce this one, from Everyday Life. This one is another, like, a filler track. It starts out with just piano, and it's pretty nice, and then it moves into a guitar section with, like, poetry over it, which is slightly less nice. Number 149, My Universe acoustic version from the My Universe single. I feel like I need to disclaim that I have no problem with BTS before I put this one this low on the list. It's this version of the song that's particularly bad. The actual version is higher up on the list. I do not like the way it sounds when it's stripped back to just acoustic guitar, because the production was half of the interest of this song and half of what kept it actually moving. Without that production, and when it's just on an acoustic guitar, the BTS like rap spoken fast thing in the middle sounds like that old trend of white girls taking like DMX songs and playing them on the acoustic guitar. It's a really jarring and unpleasant listen. The whole song just sounds like unfinished without the production. Number 148, Pour Me live at the Hollywood Bowl from the Fix You single. This has to be the worst Chris Martin vocal performance put to tape. It's honestly kind of painful to listen to. He's just so like nasally and worn, because I mean it's probably the end of a concert that this was recorded at, but it's really not a pleasant listen with his voice that like rough, especially for a song that towards the latter half demands him to go really high up in his range, and like sort of he does this like yelling cadenza thing that gets like comically faded out towards the end of the song, like the live engineer didn't want people to hear it too loud. It's an okay song in its own right, just sort of standard fare from the X and Y era without like the big lush production to it. And I think it could be an okay song were it recorded, but his vocal take live is not good. Number 147, A Spell, a Rebel Yell from the Violet Hill single. I'm kind of loath to use the phrase air pudding, but that's really what this is here. It's this spacey, pad, synthy interlude thing with Chris Martin singing over it. Honestly, it sounds like Brian Eno opened a portal back in time directly into an 80s department store training video, and Chris Martin got sucked in. Number 146, 1.36 from the Scientist single. Coldplay's never really been a good band to go to for like a really hard rocking, like get your blood pumping sort of track, especially because Chris Martin's voice does not have that sort of power behind it. He's more of a balladry pop sort of guy. And then on top of that, this song has not a great mix and a really limping gait into its composition. It was an interesting move to put the one where they did in like the main riff, because it sounds sort of suspended, but also at the same time, because of the bad performance, it sounds more like it's limping. I like the chorus enough, and it doesn't overstay its welcome, but other than that, it's not great. Number 145, One I Love, from the In My Place single. I guess during the sessions for A Rush of Blood to the Head on the B-sides, Chris Martin was not having a great day vocally, because once again, he's totally devoid of energy. Well, he's trying, clearly, but he sounds like tired and like held down in a really bad way. And on top of that, the instrumental itself is just sort of this boring-y U2 stadium rocker thing that's not really innovative in any way and is just sort of boring to listen to. Number 144, Murder, from God Put a Smile Upon Your Face single and its own single release. I like the way that this song has sort of like a swinging, like waltzy sort of feel to it. And I like the driving texture of the main rhythm guitar part, but Chris Martin also does not do this song justice. It's about like getting chased down and murdered, and his vocal delivery is really reedy and weak and like just sort of passive in a way that a song with a chorus that goes, "They're gonna murder me," doesn't really work with. Number 143, A Head Full of Dreams, from A Head Full of Dreams. As with a lot of tracks on this album, it's compressed, like brick-walled, and it's grating to listen to because of it. And on top of that, it's like a stock Coldplay song, like with a big blown out like stadiumness and a bit of like the synthy expansiveness, but combined with the sort of 80s pop production revival that was really popular at the time. Number 142, Lost with Jay-Z, from Prospects March and from the Lost single. I'm going to reserve most of my comments about the actual song Lost until I actually get to it, because this one is just Lost with Jay-Z on it. There was like a blank space of chorus in the original song, I'm pretty sure, that just had like a boring riff over it. And I think they just like stuck him right in there, which is never a good idea, in my opinion. You never want to take a song that doesn't have a rapper and just shove a rapper into it, because, you know, it's not a space made for rapping. Like, if you're going to include a rapper in your song, do it like Gorillaz does, where they make the space for the rapper. On top of that, his bars are kind of just boring. They're like, you know, you got to work on your success and don't let anyone hold you down sort of thing. There's a part where he goes like, "Suicide is a suicide," and something about his delivery is comical. Plus the way he comes in, he's got like a string of like 7 ad-libs winding up to the start of his verse, which just feels like too much. Number 141, Infinity Symbol, from Music of the Spheres. This one is kind of bewildering to behold. It starts out with this like jock jam like beat with the recording of like what I assume is like a crowd of soccer players or soccer fans or something singing that like Olay song, and then there's like a waterfalling arpeggiated synth over it. It's such like a jarring, weird sound, and it only gets weirder because this like sad spacey synth and piano line comes out over it and like just sits on top of it instead of really blending with it. And then Chris Martin comes in later on, and surprisingly, it turns into a pretty interesting sound. I wouldn't call it great, but it's kind of interesting to behold what they do to that. And it's also a really interesting sound that I haven't heard before, to have this sort of spacey Coldplay, like sad, airy thing going on with this like driving jock jam beat under it. It's very strange. Number 140, Everglow from A Head Full of Dreams and from the Everglow single. This is a really sad example of a song that gets killed in production because they just smashed it. It's got all the hallmarks of way too loud EDM production. Like, this feels like a loudness war result, but this came out in like 2015, I think. There's heavily compressed piano bits that have the snare and the kick side-chained over them, so the piano just sort of disappears. It's not good. It feels like Baby's first EDM production course. Number 139, Everyday Life from Everyday Life. This is a closing track, and it really sounds like it was made to be one. It's got, this sort of sad, plotting Coldplay thing going on, like the standard, sad Chris Martin at the piano thing going on. And this, really dense production with, hazy strings and what sounds like a Wurlitzer or something paired with the piano. It's kind of just a boring song on its own. And then the production, it feels kind of deliberately sappy in a way that turns the song into this big mush. It's fine enough, but it just goes straight through your head. Number 138, Another's Arms from Ghost Stories. We're getting into the really, middling territory here of songs that are just completely mediocre. This song's got, an interesting sort of synthesized vocal bit going over it, which is kind of interesting. I like the melody that's carrying, but the part where Chris Martin's like, Another's Arms, it goes on way too long. That melody is repeated over and over again as the song just sort of builds production-wise, but doesn't actually do anything structurally. And there's just sort of a middle bit where there's a solo in there, and it feels like it was just sort of put together as a bunch of building blocks and not really an interesting song. Number 137, Ink from Ghost Stories. This one is very much just a standard pop song of the time. It's got that cheesy, guitar thing going on with the slightly hip-hop influenced beat, but it's not really a hip-hop song. It's really just sort of a cheesy, standard pop song. The melody towards the end gets really annoying because Chris Martin joins in with singing doos over it, which is... It's just completely boring and corporate. Number 136, Fun featuring Tovlo from A Head Full of Dreams. This is the big 80s revival sound. You can tell right away from the drum beat that's got that what sounds like a wood block with echo on it, and then towards the middle and towards the end you get the classic Phil Collins gated snare. It's such a blatant attempt to cash in on the revival of 80s music at the time. And then on top of that, you've got this really played out boring structure where you've got the male vocalist who starts the song, and you've got the female vocalist who comes in later with her own part. And then at the end, they sing together, except Chris Martin and Tovlo have completely distinct voices. I would err on the side of it being Chris Martin's fault, or maybe it's just the mix. They could not blend. Their voices sounded like two completely different melodies, even though they were singing in harmony. Not at a single point did they sound like they were harmonizing. Number 135, Army of One from A Head Full of Dreams. I like the chopped up vocal bit. It's interesting enough, and it feels like it fits into a pop context without being totally derivative. And then there's this kind of big organ sound that makes me want to be listening to Fix You instead of this song. I think the chorus is fine enough, but that's the part of the song where you can really hear just how much they had to touch up Chris Martin's voice. It's really obviously unnatural. And I'm not one to ever really complain about, vocoder when it's used like Caroline Polachek does it, or, 100 Gex does it, as sort of this enhancement of the experience and the art. But it feels like they're just trying to disguise that he's had a rough take, and they just went with the rough take, which is not great. I like the way it sounds towards the end, where he starts getting up into his higher range and dancing around up there, and it sort of crescendos a bit. But the song feels like it's gone on too long by the time it gets to its second chorus, and it's only 3 minutes long. Number 134, Up and Up from A Head Full of Dreams. This song is another example of a song that was completely written to be a closer and nothing else. It's built around this sort of syncopated vocal rhythm thing going on, where he's singing about, getting up and, being uplifting and all that sort of cheesy stuff that you would expect from a closer. I think that the mix is really bad. Like, it feels like everything in the song is buried under the drum track. But that's kind of just what happens with the whole album, unfortunately. I don't know how they ended up doing it like that. This song goes on a little long, and other than that, it's just sort of a bland closer that feels like this forced high note that doesn't really say anything new. Number 133, When I Need a Friend from Everyday Life. It's a really beautiful piece, honestly. It's this like sort of long, slow, chorus-focused piece that there's a bit of piano in it too. And it's really, it's a really beautiful piece, honestly. But it's like 3 minutes long, and it doesn't really have any complexity to it. If I wanted to hear something like that, I would just sort of, I think there's a track on the Home Alone soundtrack. Like, I would just listen to the Home Alone soundtrack if I wanted what this song is giving me, and it would be better on the Home Alone soundtrack. Number 132, Sunrise from Everyday Life. It's the intro piece, it's this little string thing, it's pleasant enough to listen to, and it doesn't really do much. It's fine enough, it's pretty, it does a little modal thing, but it's not much. Number 131, Let Somebody Go, from Music of the Spheres and from the Let Somebody Go single. This is just an improved version of that Tuvlo ballad from A Head Full of Dreams, which I'm not complaining about. It's got a sort of an odd bar structure thing going on with it. The melody is a lot more interesting. I like the production more because it's less like obviously 80s feeling and a little bit out of your face in a good way. And he actually blends with Selena Gomez, so I don't know if that's... I have to chalk that up to just being the terrible mastering and production that was on A Head Full of Dreams. I really like the melodic thing it does, where he's na na na, like right before the chorus, his voice like hits a low note and like curves up in a really sweet way, and I think that's really interesting. The song, it's a standard song, better than the Tuvlo one, but also just sort of a boring space-filling ballad. Number 130, No More Keeping My Feet on the Ground, from the Safety EP and from the Yellow single. This is back when they really, really wished they were Radiohead, and you can feel it on this song. Like, the drums and the synth sound like they're ripped straight from Kid A. He's got, like, spacey reverb on his voice, and he does, like, a little shake thing going on that he had back then, which was very clearly Tom York derivative. The echoey, like, guitar sound getting, like, gated sounds like the piano from Planet Telex. The synth in the chorus sounds like Meeting in the Aisle, which I don't know if that was public back then, but whatever. It still sounds like Radiohead. The song itself is kind of boring. It's got a nice groove to it, but again, it just sounds like it wants to be Radiohead. It's day 2 of filming this video. That's why I'm in a new shirt. It's 11 p.m., and I have work in the morning, but I just gotta get this thing done. Number 129, Only Superstition, from the Brothers and Sisters single. This is a really boring song, honestly, just straight through. It kind of feels like something that would be like on a first or second EP from a band that doesn't really know what they want to be. The main guitar riff feels very, not basic, but just sort of underdeveloped and not interesting. And it's overproduced in the way that a band would overproduce a record that they want it to sound like Radiohead. Number 128, See You Soon, from the Blue Room EP. This is a very, sweet, lovey, shoe-stary sort of guitar song. Very down on your luck sounding. And I really do like the acoustic guitar part. And I think the melody in the song is really nice. But the recording and production is what really kills it and what like pulls it down, I'd say like a good 20, 30 spots. Chris Martin's voice is really ragged in this one, and not in a way that sounds like tired, but in a way that just sounds unpolished. It doesn't add anything to the song that his voice is really worn down and like gravelly. It's not gravelly in a dramatic way though. And then there's like organ chords that come in like halfway through, and they sound like they were written without actually knowing what's being played on the guitar. Like, it sounds like they're playing chords that don't match up. And then to top it all off at the end, there's these like shakers that come in with a, cheesy rhythm that feels like it's trying to give energy to a song that already had what it needed. Number 127, Lost, from Viva La Vida and the Lost single. This is so weirdly tired. It's like the second, I think, big single on that record. Obviously, Viva La Vida is the big one. But even this was a weird choice for a single because the song has no energy. the big like tom beat thing that's going on in the back combined with the organ sound makes it feel really muted, and the melody itself doesn't actually lend any energy to that. And especially since there's like two solo sections on here that are just over the main chords, and the solos aren't invigorating in any way. It feels like a song that just sort of exists and goes on and doesn't really have a purpose. I think the production is pleasant, but this song is, because of it in a way, is too tired. Number 126, Oh, from Ghost Stories. It's the last track on the album, and it starts as this slow piano thing with like just this arpeggiated chord sequence, and it grows a little bit, but not much. When the bass comes in and this like spacey-ish production, it's nice enough. It just feels like sort of fluff that goes in and out of your head. The melody is pleasant, and then there's just like this ambient thing as the closer, which feels like a sort of a weak way to end an album. I feel like the song would be better if the ambient bit at the end was left off, and it reached a more satisfying climax. Number 125, Ghost Story, from the A Sky Full of Stars single. I don't really know what energy this song is trying to give off. It doesn't have much energy in the first place. It feels like Glass of Water if you made it boring and took out all of its energy. I do think it's really overproduced and also kind of like crushed a bit in the mix, like it doesn't have room to breathe. That said, I do like the weird synthesizer noise that does come in over the chorus. And cynically, I do not like that it's verse, chorus, quietish bit that's supposed to draw your ear in, and then the big chorus that is pretty much the same, but it feels bigger because you had the quiet bit before it. Number 124, Hymn for the Weekend, from A Head Full of Dreams. I thought until just now that the big single from A Head Full of Dreams was Adventure of a Lifetime, but I guess this one is apparently bigger, which is surprising. I think Adventure of a Lifetime is a more unique and more interesting song. This one isn't bad either. It feels more like it was written for Beyonce than written to be a Coldplay song with Beyonce on it. Like Coldplay just wanted to do a song around the idea of a Beyonce feature, which is better than just shoving Jay-Z into a song that you've already written. But still, I think it's an okay track. It's got a weird darkness underpinning it that I do like a lot. Something about the way the piano is played and the way the song is mixed. But I think the boom bap sort of drum beat comes off as a bit cheesy, and I do not like the way the horns land in the... Is that in the... Yeah, I guess that's in the chorus. There's like this loud horn sound that feels like a weird orchestral hit sort of thing. And it's not a great sound. But, I mean, otherwise it's a pretty passable single. Number 123, Clocks, from A Rush of Blood to the Head, and from the Clocks single. I feel like I'm going to get a lot of flack for putting this one this far down on the list. It's like one of their biggest, well, most enduring singles, I think. It's a really weak song to listen to. Like, the initial piano riff is interesting, but it's like overblown into this big, spacey thing that just feels really bloated and pointlessly large. The lyrics are boring and kind of trite. The melodies are repetitious. Really the only interesting part of the song... Well, there's two actually interesting parts of the song. There's the bridge that it breaks into where it's like, and nothing else compares. And that part is interesting because it like modulates into the like key of the flat seventh, I think. Which is a very interesting move. But even that bridge gets kind of boring because he just says, and nothing else compares, like 3 times. And I do like the part at the end where he sings, like, Home Where I Wanted to Go. I think that melody is pretty pleasant. Overall, it's just sort of a really boring song. Number 122, Now My Feet Won't Touch the Ground, from Prospects March EP. It feels like Coldplay had, like, a totally done closer guitar, like, acoustic guitar, soft ballad thing that was very stock to them. With these pleasant, rich horn swells at the end that give it a pleasant character. And then someone decided to listen to Tomorrow Never Knows and was like, I think this song could really use tabla drums and reversed guitar. It's so jarring and strange. I mean, maybe they wanted this thematic tie with, what's the one? Life in Technicolor? But it's so out of place on this one, especially because it feels like the composition was made without that in mind. Number 121, Paradise from Milo Xyloto. This is just like devised to be a big radio song. The lyrics are stupid. The production is really just huge and expansive. I mean, the composition was made with that in mind, so it's not horrible, but it feels cheap in a way. Like it doesn't really have anything to it, but it's trying to make you feel something. I think the melody is fine enough as a pop song. The melody in the chorus is kind of boring and annoying, and I'm just not one for that big, like, I guess post EDM explosion production style with that huge synth taking up the like secondary melody in the chorus there. But there is something to this song that's why I tend to defend Coldplay a lot of the time, even in their like worse songs. Right at the ending, Chris Martin takes the melody that he's been singing in the choruses. That's felt really like sickly sweet when he's done it before, and he changes up the piano chords under it in a slightly harmonically interesting way, and it makes for a really beautiful ending. That's just like, I felt bitter and jaded through most of this song because it feels so totally cheesy. But then he does that at the end, and I'm like, oh, there's something to it. Number 120, Always in My Head from Ghost Stories. This is the intro to Ghost Stories, and it's a really low-stakes intro. I do like the manipulated choir sound that it opens on, and that production style that carries on through the rest of the song. But besides that, it's just kind of a slow, drifting song. Martin's vocal melody is really not intricate, and it's spaced out really far. If you let the song just sort of wash over you, it's a pleasant enough experience. The guitar parts that come in are big and spacey, U2 via their guitarist, as a lot of their songs tend to be. It's fine enough. Number 119, Old Friends from Everyday Life. It's this really understated, very low energy, sweet like song. It feels like an ode in a lot of ways. I really do like the guitar playing on it, and the melody is fairly sweet. Something I didn't actually notice until I just now re-listened to the ending of the song especially, is the whole thing's got a very, what's his name? John Fahey influence. Fahey? Like this real American primitive guitar sound going on. And I do really appreciate that in the song, especially in the ending, where he moves to this descending, sweet, bluesy thing. And I'm one to be a sucker for a chorus that hangs out on the 2 and the 5 and just goes back and forth for a minute. Ultimately, it's just a song that sort of passes through your head, but it's a pretty pleasant listen. Number 118, Humankind from Music of the Spheres. So very 80s. Even the intro sounds like Jump by Van Halen in a way. It's just like a huge mishmash of 80s music cultural like carry through. I think the lyrics are pretty simple. I mean, good message, obviously, but kind of stupid and simplistic, if I'm being honest. And the big sound of that huge like synth gets really annoying. But I will say the chorus melody does, I think, carry the song through. When he sings Human and he goes up to that like 7th and drops down instead of resolving up, it's so interesting. It's a really interesting turn. I think there's also a level of charm to it. Like, it's cheesy, but it's cheesy in a well-intentioned way, and that makes it hard to be really angry with the song. Ultimately, it's fine enough. I keep saying that. Number 117, WOTW/POTP from Everyday Life. I think the title stands for Wonder of the World, Power of the People. It's a like minute-long little acoustic guitar demo with vocals. I think it's really it's really sweet, song, very pleasant. It feels very homespun, especially because it's like a demo recording in low fidelity. I don't know if it's actually like authentically a demo. It might not be. It feels like something that could be blown up into this big, huge Coldplay thing. But I really value that they didn't do that to this. I think it stands out really sweetly as this, homespun demo recording. That being said, it is short and fairly incomplete, but I like it while it lasts. Number 116, All Your Friends from the A Sky Full of Stars single. It's got a good groove to it. It's a very low stakes, I wouldn't say late night because it doesn't have that quality to it. But it's like a low, muted, sort of slinky groove to it. That's kind of infectious in a way. The only issue is that, like a lot of the songs from this and the next album, it's really like deathly overproduced. Other than that, it's a passable song. Number 115, Orphans from Everyday Life. Chris Martin, you gotta stop saying boo 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 boom in your choruses or pre-choruses. It's like the most annoying lyric you could possibly put in a song. It's a nice little guitar-y thing with, chant vocals over it. And it's like a new sound as well. Compositionally, it's pretty much just every big Coldplay song has a similar quality, with that like new funky bassline style that I think started with A Head Full of Dreams and has sort of carried as a through line in their discography since. Functionally, this is the same song as Every Teardrop is a Waterfall, with less energy to it, which is fine. There's a place for it. Number 114, Champion of the World from Everyday Life. There's like a certain, I think, designation you could make for Coldplay songs. There's a bin where you could put a lot of their discography into that's like these sort of, bland, like, you do this to it. It's like a nice, sweet song. It's meant to be uplifting. Like Every Teardrop is a Waterfall and Orphans. And you can take this song and put it in that box too. It's, got big... it's got a big, spacey guitar sound. Other than that, it's kind of bland. It's fine enough, though. I feel like I keep saying it's fine enough as this weird justification. When I say it's fine enough, I mean that it's never unpleasant. It's never my, like, I should turn this off, or, ooh, I don't like that. It's just very stock. Number 113, Death Will Never Conquer from the Viva La Vida single. Martin does not have a bluesy voice, at least not here. I think he gets better at it later, but on this track he doesn't have a particularly bluesy voice, and this is a short blues piano, gospel-y influenced interlude thing. It's got charm to it. It's not a big, developed experience, but it's a sweet little piece that makes sense as a B-side. Number 112, Midnight from Ghost Stories. My first instinct was to call this Bon Iver derived, Bon Iver. It's not, because Justin Vernon didn't do this until it didn't come out until a year later. I mean, maybe they like heard it somehow, but he hadn't done it yet, which is interesting. And by Bon Iver, I'm referring to 715 Creeks from 22 A Million, which is just him singing this very plaintive, simple vocal melody out of time with a stack of vocoder, which is the core of this song as well. It's not quite out of time, but it does drift a lot in a really interesting and sweet sort of way. And I do like the melody that's going on. It gets a little boring for a while, but then there's this like synth arpeggiated thing that feels like a slight build. It's very EDM inspired, but like low, not low energy, but low stakes. And I really like that sound. It's very cool. Number 111, A Sky Full of Stars from Ghost Stories and the A Sky Full of Stars single. I'm surprised that I put it up this high, but I understand why I did it. It's obviously like designed to be a big pop banger. It's got more of that like thick EDM synth going on. It's got like a drop in it, for God's sake. And that sort of like syncopated rhythm that goes on through the song. I think it plays into the Tresillo pattern. Standard pop conventions. But at its core, it's a pretty well-written pop song. Like, I think the melody is really nice. As much as the screamy lead vocal, no, as much as the screamy lead synth sound is kind of played out and cheesy, I think it fits well enough on the song because it was made for it, and I like the way it goes big at the end. Also, it does a little bit of a production change-up in the middle, which is interesting. Number 110, Birds from A Head Full of Dreams. This song feels like it wants to be bigger than it is. It feels like it's reaching for mountain energy, which it's not like a totally dead song, but there's definitely something about the production that saps it a little bit drier than it should be. But it's got a pleasant, bounce to it all the way through. And I think the chorus thing that it has at the end is pretty cool. I like where it builds. Number 109, My Universe from Music of the Spheres. I told you that the main version of the song was going to be higher up than the other one. I think the chorus melody, largely boring. Except for it's got a bit of a bluesy turn that gives it a bit of interest to it. Honestly, weirdly enough, I think there's a lot of Coldplay songs from this era, and maybe it's Max Martin's influence, where it's like a very stock, predictable chorus melody, but it does a little bit of harmonic thing. Maybe that's Coldplay's influence. A little bit of harmonic thing that makes it stand out a bit more than just a stock, forgettable chorus. It's a clever move. I do actually like BTS's voices on this song when they're actually singing. In my opinion, the sort of seductive 90s boy band is the only way I can describe it. Sort of rapping in the middle of a largely sung song. Should have stayed back then. It's not a good sound, but I mean they're pretty good on the song otherwise. Number 108, Broken from Everyday Life. This is like Death Will Never Conquer, but it's not just him solo. He's got a gospel chorus behind him. He still doesn't have the sort of soul and power that I think would be necessary to really make this song shine. And he's a little nasally at points. But he's definitely a better singer than he was at the Viva La Vida era. And you can tell because he's got he'll hold out a note, and at the end he'll put a little vibrato on it, and it sounds pretty pleasant. But yeah, it's a pretty stock standard sounding gospel-y tune. Number 107, All I Can Think About Is You from the Kaleidoscope EP. This is the part of I think the highlight of the terrible mixing of this era. This song is just smashed to shit. It would definitely benefit from a bigger, spacier mix, but it sounds like it was just crushed for radio or something, which is weird because it's like a B-side on an EP. Like, who's going to be listening to this on the radio? I like the bass line a lot, surprisingly. I think it's one of those bass lines where you could just ride on it for a while, like a Past is a Grotesque Animal sort of thing, but not as intense or desperate. I did not like the piano switch up because it's largely a mellow song with a bit of piano there. But then it gets to these big, powerful chords that you can tell are just building to this big climax, but it's a surprisingly nice climax. The solo is interesting enough. There's a bit of harmonic change in there. I think there's a flat 6 chord in there. And Martin is, he's big in a nice way. Yeah. Number 106, Flags from the Flags single. And also, I guess, the Japanese bonus edition of Everyday Life, I think. And then people complained and they released it separately. This song, acoustic guitar and a boom, bap, da boom, boom, bap sort of drum line feels like it dates it to before the song was written in a way. What is that song? It sounds like Teenage Dirtbag. It kind of reminds me of Teenage Dirtbag by Wheatus. That aside, pretty pleasant song. I wrote down that he does name dropping at some point. I guess he does that. This also sounds like it's a parody of Vampire Weekend, or maybe you could fit it into Father of the Bride, because Father of the Bride is a parody of Vampire Weekend. It's a sweet song. It's sugary. Never does anything I dislike, really. And I like the la la la's bit at the end. I think that's a very nice touch, the descending melody. Number 105, A Message from X and Y. I don't know what happened when I listened to X and Y the first time. I went back and double checked through the list, obviously. And the first time that I heard this song, I put it like way at the bottom. I was like really mad for some reason. I came back to it. It's completely inoffensive. It fits in with the era, especially with tracks like Speed of Sound, and it's got, or like Clocks even, because it's got this big stadium production chorus and thing. It starts off really cheesy when he goes, "My song is love," and it starts off with just soft acoustic guitar. But it's just a stock Coldplay song. But I like what his voice does when he sings the chorus in the higher register. I think it's listenable. It's fine. Number 104, Arabesque from Everyday Life. When I was listening to this album, I think Stromae is not featured as like he doesn't show up on the track next to the artists, which is weird, but it like caught me off guard. I had to go check that was him because I recognized the voice from like French class. It's a cool bluesy, driving song. Good message about like unity and stuff. I feel like getting someone to sing in French was a little tactless way of doing it. Like, like an Ebony and Ivory thing, but not as like cheesy. But the overdriven bluesy melody, it wears its welcome. This song is 6 minutes long, and it probably shouldn't be. Number 103, Everglow. I guess it's like the extended mix. It doesn't have it's also named just Everglow, and it's on the Everglow single right next to Everglow. So you get two songs that are both named Everglow. Those come on shuffle. How do you know which one you're listening to without hearing it? It's still compressed to shit. Still totally smashed, but they put reverb on his voice in this one. And it being smashed is not so much of a bother when it's just him and a piano. I think this version is longer too. You can hear his voice like clip. You can hear him like hitting the limiter hard whenever he hits like a high note. And his voice is a little thin at parts. But I like the piano playing a lot. I think it's a very sweet, earnest song that is docked a few places because the ending sample is really cheesy. Number 102, Oh Reprise from the Sky Full of Stars single. This is a weird experiment. It sounds like the Outer Wilds soundtrack in a way. Because it's got this like very spacey thing with a chiptune arpeggio going, up the whole time, and it does it relies more, I think, on its like harmonic implications than anything else. But then on top of that, it's got like slide guitar, which I guess I'm a sucker for. I don't know. I thought this was very sweet. I'm overusing the word sweet. I thought this was a very pleasant listen. Number 101, People of the Pride from Music of the Spheres. I'm still in recovery from Hollywood by Car Seat Headrest. Like, don't do this to me again, please. The chorus is a car commercial. It's got the doo 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 like thing going on in the fuzz bass line, like just that and drums, and then hollering "yeah," which is so cheesy and overblown. And then you go, why is this track up here? And it's because the verses are really cool. I think like the space that the chorus the verses get, and the way it moves between the chords, and Chris Martin's delivery too is really impressive. It's got such cool ideas in the verses, and then I like the pre-chorus towards the end as well, or the bridge, I guess it would be. But the chorus is just so bad. This is really a song that's like, it should be higher and lower on the list at the same time. It's so weird. Number 100, track 100 finally. MMIX / Every Teardrop is a Waterfall. So technically these are two different tracks on the album. Milo Xyloto. Obviously it's not on the single version of the song, but MMIX is just an extended intro into Every Teardrop is a Waterfall. So, I like the sound of the synth, like the sort of plunky synth at the beginning that like carries through the song. I like the verse melody fine enough. Ultimately, this is an example of a Coldplay song that doesn't really do anything offensive, doesn't really do anything novel. It's the big Coldplay song I was talking about earlier in the big Coldplay song bin. And I like the sound of the guitar. It's a pleasant song. Number 99, Postcards from Far Away from the Prospects March EP. This song is a weird one. It's just a 50-second classical piece. If you told me that this was some like Chopin thing that they'd like dug up or something or just decided to put on the album, I'd believe you, honestly. I like it a lot though. It's got a really pretty sort of static A section. And then once it gets into like the second half of the song, it's got these really pretty classical ornamentations. It feels like I wouldn't expect this song to come out of Coldplay. It's pretty cool. Number 98, The Hardest Part from X and Y and the Hardest Part single. This is a weird, not nearly as weird as the last one. It's the first really jam bandy sort of Coldplay song that I could like name. It's a weird example. It's the counter example of a lot of the negative songs that I've showed on here, in that this is a song that gets by on the recording and the production because with that sort of classic rock piano playing style, you have to have it's got to have energy or the whole song will fall apart. But they deliver here. I'm not big on the verse melody. I think it's sort of simple and a bit boring, but I do like the place the choruses go melodically. I think it's got a very sweet chorus. It's a little long. Number 97, Higher Power from Music of the Spheres, the Higher Power single, and the Higher Power acoustic version single. This also feeds into the new disco big 80s sound of the album, but in a better way, I think, than a lot of the previous tracks. Melodically, I like the verse melody. I like the chorus melody. Like it's a good involved chorus, I think. And Chris Martin knows how to do this thing at the end of songs, where the last time he goes into the chorus, he switches up the melody in a cool way. But the thing that really, I think, carries this song is the way the bass line, I think, interacts with the vocals in the verses. Because it's got this like really driving, tight, syncopated thing going on that's really nice. And Martin smartly keeps the rhythm of the vocals in the verses really tight and like deliberately like kind of fast, I'd say. And that speed helps keep this song feel terse in the verses and blowing up in the choruses. Number 96, UFO from Milo Xyloto. I think it's a really pretty song. I really like the guitar part, and the strings that come in the latter half are rich, but they don't ever choke out the emotion of the song, and they never feel saccharine. Ultimately, what stops the song from being really nice, though, is that his vocal take isn't good, and it's processed weirdly. So the sort of delicate emotion that the song wants to get across falters because of it. Number 95, Higher Power acoustic version from the Higher Power acoustic version single. This is a really interesting one. It's not an acoustic version. I guess acoustic version is a cynical marketing term now because this isn't just a band going in and recording the song just on their instruments. For one, there is still an electric kick drum that's a bit sparse, and there are very dense layered vocals. And there's an electric guitar on it. So it's an acoustic version that's been dressed up. But honestly, that's a lot better than the song would be on its own. Like, this song probably couldn't stand without the production because it needs the energy. The kick in particular was a smart move because it just comes in like boom, like right at the, like onto the one of the verses, which the verse needs that energy. As I was saying, you lose the energy from the bass line, you have to make it up somewhere. The reason that this version is higher than the other one is for two things. I think the chorus works better when it's just on guitar with these big piano thing. especially because the like chorusy vocals have more room. And then two, the build up at the end is it's really beautiful in a way that doesn't come through when the production is already so dense in the original. Number 94, Rainy Day from the Prospects March EP. This song is so weird. I mean, it feels like, I mean, they worked with Eno on this. It feels like this was born out of one of those, what's the word? It's like obtuse strategies or something like that. It's, first off, the song is like, I feel like I gotta get this out of the way. It has this like weird start, like this like stumbling start, this fumble. And it's like, it feels like the song's leading into this like depressive slow piano piece that immediately gets cut off by this more bright palette in a weird key that's like not even related. It's a jarring moment. It sets up the attitude of the rest of the song, I think. His vocals are like auto-panned in a weird way. There's a lot of weird density in the production. And I do think that actually ends up paying off surprisingly in the choruses, which are more, I think, more direct than the verses, because it just gets stripped back to Chris Martin, the string section, and then at the last one, the guitar as well. It's a very sweet song. It's hard to feel that it's anything more than sweet because of how weird the palette is. Number 93, The Escapist from Viva La Vida. It's the hidden track at the end of Death or All His Friends, which ends up closing off the album because of it. And interestingly enough, and this is kind of why I put the song higher, although it's, I don't know, maybe that's not justified. It's the same synth bit that gets sampled at the beginning of Life in Technicolor at the beginning of the album. So it's a sort of cyclical thing. Except now it's got Chris Martin singing over it with a bit of a cheesy string arrangement, but it's a very pleasant way to end the album. Number 92, Till Kingdom Come from X and Y. So X and Y was the first Coldplay album I ever listened to, I think, in full. And I used to listen to it all the time when I was a kid, and I somehow didn't realize that this was the closing track on the album. I guess I just never heard it until I saw, I think it was The Amazing Spider-Man, and he was like skateboarding, and I heard the song playing, and I was like, oh, who is that? It sounds like Coldplay, so then I looked it up. But I didn't like it at first listen when I was a kid, but I like it now because it's folksy and I didn't like that. As far as like folksy songs go, it's pretty pleasant. I really like what the lower, like, bassier piano notes do to the feel of the song. They pin it down in a really interesting way. I think there's some like odd bar lengths that give the song a more interesting verse, and I like the way the horns sound in the chorus. Oh no. Oh, I fucked up. Oh no. Shit. Fuck. God fucking damn it, I'm so mad. I'm an idiot. Song 91, You Only Live Twice, live from Norway, is not a live-only version of a Coldplay song that was never studio released. It's not a Coldplay song. It's a cover. This is the Mad Men theme. I've never seen Mad Men. How was I supposed to know? Oh. I said I wasn't including covers. And I can include this here, because now I've listened to the original. This is worse than the original. This isn't as good as the original. I'm 70. Oh my god. So this actually works out perfectly. There is a song that I can put here that actually does, it does deserve to go here, surprisingly. Like, I would genuinely put it here. It's A Hopeful Transmission, which is the introduction to Don't Let It Break Your Heart from Milo Xyloto. It's a really nice way to get into the song. It's got this, like, this sweet string section and this, like, syncopated rhythm at the same time that come together in a really sweet way that I think it does lead into Don't Let It Break Your Heart really well. But I think I'll break these up, actually, not even just because I need to, but because Don't Let It Break Your Heart isn't continuous to this. A Hopeful Transmission might be a lead in to Don't Let It Break Your Heart, but Don't Let It Break Your Heart, if you ever listen to both songs, immediately drops any connection it had besides key to A Hopeful Transmission. Number 90, Us Against the World from Milo Xyloto. This one, I remembered not liking it, I think because a lot of the time I had started listening to the song and then turned it off, because I think the way it leads in is so boring. It's not what you're expecting. It doesn't lead into the song well, in my opinion, on first listen. I do love the vocal melody here, and the guitar chords under it are really nice and sweet. I don't like the ambient bit that you start out in, as I said, but it comes back in later under the guitar, and it grows bigger along with the addition of piano and bigger vocals. I will say this is the only time I think I've ever heard Chris Martin's voice bottom out when he goes, "Us against the world." His voice is like, it sounds like they pitched it down almost. It's like frightening. Number 89, Careful Where You Stand from the Shiver single. It's this guitar and vocal piece that has a lot of weird harmonic turns. Like the part where it like veers into where he sings Careful Where You Stand, which I guess is the chorus in a way, is so harmonically detached. It's really interesting, but also it doesn't feel fully fleshed out. But I like I guess it's like an organ-like sound that comes in at the end. I think the melody is fine. His vocals are just not very good. Overall, it's a pretty interesting song. I messed up again. My original track 88 here was How You See the World live from Earl's Court, which is a single it's on the Hardest Part single. And I was like, oh, this is a live version that hasn't been released anywhere because it's not in their discography. It's on a compilation album called Help, A Day in the Life that came out in 2005. So there is a studio recording of this song. I would actually still say it goes here. It's a really interesting song. It feels very much like it wants to... It comes from a very Radiohead place, I'd say, because it's got a very like classical music sort of angst to it in a way, which is the major 5-1 that goes on at the end of the choruses. And I didn't like the guitar at first. I felt it was a little stilted in some of the verses. But the choruses are very cool. And there's I think a point in the choruses where it like hangs on one chord at the end of a bar. That's such a jarring choice, but it's so cool and so dramatic. Very not, traditionally Coldplay. And then I love what it does at the end. It's a very intense texture, which again isn't something I would expect from Coldplay. It feels like if Coldplay made its song from OK Computer, which is good. It's a good sound. Number 87, Swallowed in the Sea from X and Y. I think there was a point in time where this was my favorite track on the album, but it was because it was when I was younger, and if I liked the intro to a song, I would listen to the intro, stop the song, and start the intro over again. It's a very pleasant intro. The melody that he sings is really beautifully pleasant, and it's over this like static droning harmony, which really lets the quality of the melody just sort of hang out there and make its own harmonic implications. Unfortunately, it slinks back into a sort of jam bandy sound, and there's, I think, a part of the song where it's just like there's no vocals between two of the choruses. That feels just like an empty filler verse for time, which is a shame. It's a really remarkable melody and great opening that just sort of falls flat. Number 86, Lost question mark from the Lost single. This is the acoustic version of the track. It's just Chris Martin at a piano, and it's a lot better than the original because, well, the denseness of the original feels like it's clamoring for an energy it never gets, and the sparse parts feel empty and vacant. The it the piano and vocal rendition justifies the sort of lower energy and peacefulness of the song more, and those sparser passages feel more like digesting a thought than they are having none. It's just all around a lot better. A lot better of a version of the song. Number 85, Talk from X and Y. This feels like a more muted version of the really good tracks on this album. It was giving me like U2 vibes, which, to be fair, every Coldplay song kind of gives me that with the guitars. I thought the verse melody was like sweet and interesting, and the chorus melody is too. The back and forth between the vocals and the guitar on that part feels a little stale, a little uninspired. And ultimately, this song feels like, I don't know, I try to think of how the melody to this song goes, and my brain auto-fills it with white shadows, which is not something you want for a song. Number 84, Life in Technicolor from Viva La Vida. I think this one has 3 versions, but I think the third one is just a live version. This is the version that's not really like a whole song, but it also is the version that gets to lead in with the same synth sample from The Escapist, which, creates I said it earlier, the whole album loop. I like this one. I like the way the synth transitions into the core of the Life in Technicolor song. I think, as opposed to Death with All His Friends, that the tabla drums really work well here, and I think it's a sitar that's being played, could be some other stringed instrument that I can't remember. I think it's a prepared piano. I think that texture is really pretty, and the way it like bursts into a big stadium sound is predictable from a Coldplay song, but it's a nice way of doing it. Number 83, Lovers in Japan from Viva La Vida. This is a pretty good song, I'd say, on the record. This is a case of a song that's kind of middling in its composition. Like, the main melody's not very engaging, but the way Martin sings on this is really nice. He hits like a high chest note, which is fairly impressive. And then the density of the production is kind of what carries the song, because that like main prepared piano riff is very cool and very driving. And then I think the spacey guitars, that is a staple of Coldplay sound. This is one of the better instances of that space being used to, add not just a new element to a song, but color that sort of amplifies what's already there. Number 82, The World Turned Upside Down from the Fix You single. I just had like a mini heart attack because I go to look up The World Turned Upside Down, just to give it a second listen as I'm going through, and the first thing that comes up is a Billy Bragg song, and I get really worried that it's a cover. It's not. This is an original Coldplay composition, and it's a really good one. I'm kind of surprised it was relegated to a B-side because it's really interesting, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily fit into the exact energy of X and Y, so I see why they did it. But this one is really, really interesting compositionally. The lyrics are stupid in the verses, and the melody sort of dances around a bit, but it's fairly simple. But the cool, interesting part of the verses is the way it just sits on the 1/7. Like, it's got this Mixolydian sound, which is the best place to be sitting for a verse of this kind. And then the cool thing that the choruses do is they make the very smart decision to immediately rock it into the 4 chord. So you get broken out of this static verse harmony and into this chorus section, which has a really cool melody. I like the sort of bluesy turn he does at the end of every phrase. And harmonically, it's also very, very cool, because it plays with the flat 7 chord, but doesn't resolve up. It goes down to the 4, but then from the 4 it doesn't go down to the 1. So it's a really non-standard sound to play with the minor 6 into the 7, or the flat 7, that is, and then not resolve that properly. Most of the time when there's an ending bit where he changes the vocal around, I think it's cool. This time it doesn't really add much, so take that as you will. Number 81, Church from Everyday Life. It's kind of like Speed of Sound, but without the pre-choruses, which really set that song apart from a number of other songs. That really makes it distinctive, because this song is a very static, sort of floaty feel to it because it's got no real change in it. But as far as that goes, it's a pretty good song. I really love the sound of the strings on this, like the way they like swell up at the end of each like line in the verses. And then in the chorus, it's very, very cool. The way he sings sort of a bit of an elaborate vocal run, and the strings just play along with that, and it blends really nicely. Number 80, Animals from the Clock single. This is a very, very cool texture for Coldplay. I'm pretty accustomed to hearing that sort of spacey, washed out sound on a lead guitar solo, but this time it's just on these like slowly strummed chords, with this very dense, almost shoegazy sound, or dream pop closer. And then for the drums, they actually lean on a drum machine sound, which sort of fits into the motif of the song. It's this very sort of bitter, detached, sort of anti-society's mold song. But for once, Chris Martin actually manages to sound like he's a part of the feeling he's expressing, because very rarely when it's a more negative Coldplay song does he sound like that. His voice is sort of worn, but not worn to the point of being a bad vocal take, especially with this particular melody, and the harmonic changes that it drifts around have this sort of sinister melancholy to them, which is very cool. The sound of the melody of the chorus is not very good, but the dense, lush texture is enough to carry you through the chorus in a way that it really wouldn't matter whether or not there was a vocal take there. It would be listenable without it. My only gripes with the song, because it would be a really cool song if it wasn't 5 minutes, which is too long for what it has, and then the crumble and fall like an animal part is where his vocal take towards the end starts to actually fall apart and doesn't have that power anymore. It is now day 3 of recording. I wore my throat out yesterday doing this video, so if I am quieter right now, that's why. Track 79, Such a Rush from the Safety EP and from the Blue Room EP. This song has a lot of very pleasant and interesting space in it. For the most part, it's just Martin and guitar. And it's got this very, very downer, depressive sound to it. And his voice is surprisingly rich here. Like, a lot of the time I'll complain that his voice is reedy. But I mean, I think he is a natural baritone, so this song is like perfectly in his range. And he manages to get a really interesting power out of it. He even hits some like very emotive notes towards the middle. But the only thing that really holds this song down is when it like blows up to the big explosion at the end that it's like building to. His vocal performance sort of falls off, and the instrumental never coheres into a big powerful thing. It just sounds like a bunch of disparate elements. Number 78, Don't Panic from Parachutes, the Blue Room EP, and the Don't Panic single. I remembered liking this one a lot when I was younger, when I first listened to this album. I don't know why. It's not that good of a song. It's got an interesting central idea that's really pleasant to listen to. It's a really well put together instrumental, but as a composition, it's just sort of boring. There's like these 2 short sections that just go back and forth, and there's 2 like separate solo sections on a song that's like 2 minutes long. It's a really weak way, I think, to open up the album, because compositionally, again, there's not a lot there. Number 77, Death and All His Friends from Viva La Vida. I really, really love the first half of this song, or just the first third of it maybe, where it's just Martin and the piano. because it's got this beautiful plaintive melody, and the playing under it is so pretty. And there's this really beautiful sort of, I wouldn't call it plaintive because it's not that far into being like sad. There's just a really beautiful sound when the descending melody repeating pattern goes over the 1 to flat 7 to 6 and the piano. It's a really pretty and very, it's emotionally rich in a way I can't really describe. Unfortunately, because this is a closer, expectedly, it does have a long build-up into a bigger stadium-filling section. And while I don't really like the instrumental on this part, I do really think that they did nail a certain closing vibe that isn't just, oh, this is the big Coldplay album ender, because of it's not such this huge uplifting thing, but also has a tone of darkness to it, I think. And then it's also in 7/8, and that gives the melody, the big soaring end of song melody, this, sort of off-kilter but not like wonky feel to it. It feels like it's being pushed into something. Did any of that make sense? I have no idea. Number 76, White Shadows from X and Y. I really didn't like this one at first when I was making the list. I think I just chucked it really far down because I listened to it straight after Square One. And the one thing that I do hold true from what I originally wrote is that it really definitely does just feel like Square Two, maybe. It's got the same palette and tries to reach a similar emotional peak, I think, without a lot of the cool things in Square One that make it really interesting and invigorating. But what I will say is, although the song definitely does go on a little bit too long, the pre-chorus is such a cool sound. The way it like builds up, and although it doesn't necessarily lead into the chorus in a very interesting way, I think the chorus melody is pretty sweet. I just don't like the ending either, is another thing that holds it down, because it's just like an organ sound with a very sappy Chris Martin over it. Number 75, Echo from Everyday Life. This is surprisingly soft from Coldplay in a really good way. It's a recurring theme on Everyday Life is they seem to... I think they went into a lot of the songs with the interest of not necessarily having to build them up to a big climactic finish thing, but just letting some of the songs just sit around understated. And I think this one definitely benefits from it. Both the vocal performance and Martin's melody are very delicate and sort of suspended, floating above this 12/8 or 6/8, very bouncy rhythm thing. The harmony itself is at times a little boring, but there are some interesting turns. And the bars are kind of hard to count the length of, or the sections necessarily don't feel like they're in like groups of 4. And I really like the sound of the way the song comes in on the dominant chord and just sits on this suspension for like several bars with this very pretty piano melody over it. It's a very sweet, bouncy song that just floats along in a very pleasant way. Number 74, Coloratura from Music of the Spheres and the Coloratura single. This was a really surprising one to see, especially on an album that feels like it wants to return to the larger pop sphere in a lot of ways. Like, Everyday Life was very clearly expressed as, oh, this is a return to form and to experimentation and to creativity without the fetters of pursuing pop. But then to have on the one that's like, okay, we're stepping back into the pop sphere, look, we have BTS and Selena Gomez, to do a 10-minute song is really surprising. And I do actually really like it. It feels like an attempt at a sort of a space oddity, because it's got a very spacey feel. And I in the first about half of the song, I think the chord changes are really, really pretty. And the melody that Chris Martin is singing over it is very sweet. It feels like it could go on for a long time, and it really does end up justifying its runtime, I think. I think there's like a middle section where you like drop out of one of the parts from like the first half into this more ambient space that doesn't really feel much like it's less. You drop into this sort of strange instrumental place that goes on for like 2 minutes or so, and then you just slide back into the original chorus, which is cool enough. It's a cool transition on its own, I think. Ultimately, the song reminds me a lot of "He's Simple, He's Dumb, He's the Pilot" by Grandaddy, and that it's a very simple song that, just because of the strength of the ideas, manages to carry itself to an extended runtime without ever feeling like it's too repetitive or too boring. Number 73, Princess of China from Milo Xyloto and the Princess of China single. This is a very interesting song. Structurally, I think it's very cool. It does, because of its structure, inherently fall into the sort of male vocalist, female feature, singing together, love song sort of thing. But it does it in a pretty... I think the palette is inventive enough that it doesn't feel too worn down. I really like I really like the verses a lot. As much as the phrasing on Chris Martin's part is kind of stumbly, I think it's an interesting sound, the melody in particular. And I like the choruses enough, but really they don't sound connected in any real way. They sound like they're completely disparate. I think it might have to do with the production, or just because there's no real ease into the new sound. But that said, I really like the ending when the both of them are singing, you know, the "'Cause You Really Had Me" refrain, and these real strings come in, and it feels like the sort of standoffish vibes of the previous parts have been elevated to this more desperate want for a connection, or this more desperate regret at a loss of one. And I think that really does manage to elevate the song past the weird stylistic issue. Number 72, Magic from Ghost Stories. I don't think I have much that I can really say about this song without doing like a really deep analysis of the structure, because it's a very simple song, but it's a very, very well-constructed pop song, and it's very sweet to listen to. I think the production does a really nice job here, though. The sort of slinky playfulness of the bass, combined with the very understated drum machine, creates this almost infectious sort of groove and playful energy in the song that I think without it, it might feel really boring. There are some production elements I didn't like the volume of the guitar, like the acoustic guitar that comes in the latter fourth, as well as the reverb on the guitar part I wasn't a fan of. But that said, I do really think it's a pretty well-written and entertaining pop song. And there's even some, like, after the big chorus, there's a very nice synthesizer part that comes in, like, on a single note, and I think that is a very cool sound. Number 71, Don't Let It Break Your Heart from Milo Xyloto. This has got to be one of the biggest oral textures Coldplay's ever made on a song. Like, the way it comes crashing in right at the start of the song is gigantic, like absolutely crushing. But it's crushing in a very sweet and sugary way, which is pretty cool. And then that energy gets a bit of a break in the more spaced out and echoey verses between the choruses. The song melodically is really consistently solid, I think, and the big chorus hook is very cool too. Number 70, Heart Emoji from Music of the Spheres. What a weird choice for a Coldplay song. It's very cool. No instruments on this one, purely vocals. But in that department, they have Chris Martin along with Jacob Collier and We Are King. Both features do an amazing job on this. Jacob Collier is sort of relegated to sweetening and elevating Martin's vocal performance. And then We Are King does their whole other thing. Again, weird that they keep falling into this pattern of male vocalist, female vocalist sing together, except now it's plural. But I think the harmonies on this thing are really, really pretty. They're sort of static and churchy during the Chris Martin and Jacob Collier part, and then you get a bit more, I'd say, a little jazzy sweetness that comes in the We Are King part. And then when they're working together, it's beautiful, especially when Jacob Collier hits these like beautiful high notes that are like detuned or something, or in like natural frequency spacing. It's really, they're like howling high notes that are so rich and warm. It's a really beautiful piece. I just wish the lyrics did more. Number 69, Daddy from Everyday Life. Very, very sad song, very soft. The lyrics are a little simplistic, but the message is there, about, having to grow up with, an absent father. I think it actually does a surprisingly good job of conveying the feelings of that. I think it actually does a good job of really respecting the message with the more understated instrumental and vocal performance. And melodically, it's very sweet, especially the like long, drawn out notes of the chorus where he sings so far away. Very, very pretty. And even though it does build up at the end, it never feels like it's forcing some bigger energy. It's like a very slow build to a more emotionally affected place. Number 68, X and Y from X and Y. Very, very cool mood on this one. It's like sinister but slow in this sort of spacey way. It feels like it could have been a Bond song in another universe or something like that. I really do like the harmonic choices on this one. I think they're very cool. It's harder to explain that in more depth because I don't know exactly what the chords are that are going on. But there's this like sardonic turn in the choruses. And the what sounds like a chromatic median move in like the big ooh hook of the chorus is really, really like pretty and affecting. It grows into this like really lush place without feeling like it's trying to make you move or feel sad or anything. It just feels like this big, spacious thing like looming over you in a very cool way. Number 67, Speed of Sound from X and Y and the Speed of Sound single. This very much feels like if Clocks was just a better, more developed, more interesting song, really. Because structurally, it's almost the same thing. And it's even got that same descending piano arpeggio thing, although it's a different arpeggio part, but it's still the focus of the song. I think that the sort of sappy, like Instagram mountain photograph mood of the verses balances really well with the more intense and interesting sound of like the pre-choruses, which in my opinion are like the best part of the song, because they've got this like dense questioning tension that explodes out into the chorus in a really cool way that takes what would have been a boring chorus and really like elevates it to something else. And in a very wise move, they actually take that pre-chorus section at the end and they expand it. They give it a major 2 chord in there, which gives it this learned, sly like feeling to it, which is such an interesting development to do to a piece, to do to a part you already had. Overall, a very solid song. Number 66, Gravity from the Talk single. I can definitely see why this is a B-side, because it's instead of the more urgent and lush sound of X and Y, it's just this very slow burn 4-chord piano song that just builds and builds for 6 minutes. But surprisingly, it does it really gracefully. There are points where the build starts to get a little boring, but throughout the melodies fair enough and interesting. But the part that sets this song apart from the rest is that the place they go when they build is really beautiful. Very lush, but never crushing, and never cloying. It feels just sort of heartbroken in a really beautiful way, especially with the new interest of Chris Martin's wordless vocal melody towards the end of the song. that's like still in the background of the mix, but it's got so much like pain in it. It's really beautiful. Number 65, Fix You from X and Y and the Fix You single. Another very big Coldplay song. Still not a fantastic song, but I do like this one a lot more than some of their other hits. It really exemplifies Chris Martin's favorite vocal trick of this era, or through a lot of Coldplay, which is like you say one thing and then you say the opposite of the thing, and you go back and forth as many times as you want to, in a way that doesn't really paint a picture, but just sounds like something. I think the song is a lot more boring than people like to remember, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad song, because the sound of the melody, like over the organ part, is really pretty. And then it like obviously explodes down into this big, colorful thing, which is one of the better examples of a big Coldplay chorus, I think. Because the Tears Stream Down Your Face melody is really well written and works very well over the slightly changed up chords. Yeah, it's very solid. Number 64, Green Eyes from Rush of Blood to the Head. Easily the most jam bandy-ish Coldplay song ever. It almost sounds like Wilco derivative. And this song almost entirely manages to get by on charm alone. So if you don't like Chris Martin himself, you're probably not going to like this song at all. It's very sappy, very sweet, very shoe-staring. But it is, at its core, a very pleasant song. I'm especially fond of the choruses. The so much brighter than I met you part adds a really nice, a little touch of harmonic darkness that really manages to hold the song together and keep it from just being this mush. Number 63, We Never Change from Parachutes. Very slow, swaying, sort of sad song, but never in a grating or beat you over the head with it way. Obviously, the production is very, very beautiful, very rich in a very sweet way. I love the vocal melodies. I think they're really pretty, especially in the choruses. Ultimately, the song is a little boring, gets a little stale by the end of its runtime, because it's just sort of the same swaying, sad mood for a while. But I will say I really love what he does at the end, where he takes the sort of awkwardly spaced out verse melody and condenses it into like a 3/4 tighter melody and reharmonizes it in a really cool way. Number 62, Politic from A Rush of Blood to the Head. I think the lyrics are very stupid, very like pseudo-political, like they feel like they're politically charged, but they're very not. But I think the harmonic choices really sell this one. And even though the melody is fairly simple, it's very solid on its own. And in the verses, sometimes he does some interesting things with the melody. Like I think he does like a cool vocal run where he says, "Give me heart and give me soul" in the second verse. That's very cool. I really do like the vibe that it's giving me, but unfortunately it ditches that halfway through. Unfortunately or fortunately, actually, it's not a terrible change. It kills the more serious, eerie mood going on and brings it to this lusher, more cloying, desperate place, which I don't personally like as much, but I don't think it's a bad move, and it gives the cloying section a bit more interest that it came from such a dark, oppressive section. Number 61, Bigger Stronger from the Safety EP and the Blue Room EP. This is definitely like a combination of Radiohead and Jeff Buckley at the turn of the century. This is exactly what it feels like. Not a bad song in any means, and I really do like the main verse melody, like the touch of a button anywhere I want to go. Sometimes they double up the vocal too, and it's just a very cool, very rich melody. Unfortunately, the song doesn't feel like the choruses are at all cohesive, because it drops into this new harmonic space that feels totally disconnected, in a way that doesn't necessarily serve the song. It just feels confusing and muddled. But towards the end, there's a very cool, keys sound, and it hovers back and forth on a Dorian 1/4 that sort of sells this slick vibe that you don't really see on a lot of Coldplay songs, but it sells it well. Day 5 of recording. It's Halloween today. Number 60, Cemeteries of London from Viva La Vida. This song I have a bit of a weird issue with, the same way I had an issue with Lost, in that something in the production or the arranging makes the song feel muted and tired when it's supposed to have this galloping intensity that is supposed to propel it forward. Ultimately, it sounds like it's a little sleepy. Compositionally, though, I do like the song. I think the main melody is very pretty, especially at the beginning when it's over a weird harmonic piano chord thing, arpeggio. But ultimately, the song is too tired to have a real energy, even when it's got choruses with like big loud la-las. And there's a guitar section in the middle that sounds really cool, but just feels flat. It's a good song that's killed by a weird mix. Number 59, In My Place, from A Rush of Blood to the Head and the In My Place single. Big, sappy song, as you would expect from Coldplay. Very sweet and lush right out of the gate, sort of spacey U2-ish. I like the vocal melody on this one. In the verses, I think the chorus melody, however, is kind of boring and annoying with the harmonized loud yeahs that swell up at the beginning of each chorus. But that's not enough to end up deterring the sort of sweet, infectious, swaying energy that the song has, especially with the denseness of the production. And towards the end, I do actually like what they do when they change up the chorus melody in the last section, which is a Coldplay staple. And I think it's much better in that section with the melody that's there than the previous choruses. Number 58, Princess of China acoustic from the Princess of China single. My biggest problem with the original version of this song was that due to the way the production was handled, the chorus felt like it was completely distinct from the verse. When it's just on acoustic guitar, that fixes the issue. The sections actually transition into each other really sweetly, and it still retains the sort of plaintive energy that the song needs, while also giving it a dreamier, sweeter feel. Number 57, A Whisper from A Rush of Blood to the Head. This song is really like suspended. It feels like it's just sort of floating in midair in this very cool way. Part of that's due to the mixing, especially in the beginning. The sound of the guitar feels like distant, like it's not really warm, like it's coming from somewhere else, which is a very interesting texture, especially with Chris Martin just repeating a whisper really quietly. And then I do really like the way the song sort of blows up in the choruses. I guess that's the choruses, the part where he says, "I hear the sound of the ticking of clocks." It switches back and forth between this more like mellowed out, questioning sort of mood and the explosive sound of the chorus. One thing I don't actually like about the production is the very strange decision for, at the end of every single one of those ticking of clock sections, for the drums to sort of disappear behind a wall of strings into just like tapping lightly on a cymbal. It stunts the energy of the song in a weird way. And it would make more sense and be kind of an interesting thing to do had they stopped dropping the drums during those sections towards the end of the song. It would have made a really interesting build. But the fact that they do continue to drop the drums just adds to this weird suspense that this song has. It makes it feel almost like it's a dream. Number 56, Amazing Day from A Head Full of Dreams. This song is beautiful. It's got this big, the classic Coldplay sort of sappy song that builds toward the end into a big chorus, but it does it so beautifully. The piano chords in particular are really pretty, especially with his vocal melody on top of it. This is so pretty, and the place it builds to is really beautiful. The only reason that this isn't in like the top 25 even is because, like the rest of A Head Full of Dreams, it was mastered like shit. Who decided that everything on this album needed to be crushed to like a sausage of a waveform? It kills the expansiveness of the song. Honestly, it's disappointing how much energy is stolen from this beautiful piece just because the mix was done bad. Number 55, Beautiful from Music of the Spheres. It's spelled so weird. This is a weird song because For one big reason, and that's the entirety of the first verse has its vocals pitched up a whole octave. So it sounds like there's a chipmunk on the track for the first half, which is so weird, so jarring, and also kind of a shame because the song itself is beautiful. Like I love the texture, the fluttery sort of keys that are going on with the guitar under it, and this song's got slide guitar in the choruses that is so pretty. Not to mention the composition is really beautiful. Like the main melodies are so pretty. And I mean, it's not chipmunked for the entirety of the song. In the second verse, Chris Martin comes in normally when the piano comes in, which is actually a pretty cool mood change, going from the high pitched poppy vocal sound into just his natural voice. It makes for a more emotional, plaintive shift. But ultimately, I think the song would have been better if the first verse was not chipmunked the whole way. My lighting's all fucked up because I did the rest of the videos at night, but I have really thin blinds, so I'm doing this one at like 5 p.m. and it's so bright. Number 54, Charlie Brown from Milo Xyloto. Very, very cool pop song, honestly. It's got this commanding energy through the entire thing, a lot of which is due to the weird bar structure that's going on in the song, especially in the verses. It's very prominent, but I feel like I think in the chorus, like the main chorus line, they drop a single bar or a single beat out of like one of the first bars, which is such this cool like jarring shift that really is so propulsive. On top of that, the production is really dense in a really good way that sort of coalesces into this big candy mush of a song. It's just so sweet but so pretty. The vocal lines are really beautiful, especially in the verses. They managed to float very deftly across these weirdly structured bar lines, these uneven bars. And then the song, especially the most beautiful moment of the song, is right at the end. At the end of the last chorus, Martin like soars up into this high register, like belting this huge chest note before the song slowly like slides down into this very pretty piano closer that sounds almost like Christmas music. This song is like pure like sugar candy. It's great. Number 53, Life in Technicolor 2 from Prospects March EP and from the Life in Technicolor 2 single. This was a weird choice for this song in particular, the way they did it, because obviously Life in Technicolor, just one, like no subtitle, is the first track on Viva La Vida, but that one's totally instrumental. I mean, besides like stadium like loud O's that Martin is singing, but there's no like main vocal line. So what this is that second half that comes in after the synth bit, expanded out into a full song with lyrics and everything. I don't know why they didn't include Life in Technicolor 2 on the album. Like I don't know why they didn't just combine them into this whole long opener, because it would be an amazing opener. Because this song is great, honestly. It feels sort of like Viva La Vida, but like more picked up and more ready to go. Especially because of the density of the production with the prepared piano sound, and like I think there's tabla drums on it too. Compositionally, it's another great pop song. The "Love Don't Let Me Go" line in the choruses, the whole chorus has a great melody all the way through. That really manages to elevate this song to this huge, expansive feeling. It's just a really good song. Number 52, Things I Don't Understand from the Speed of Sound single. It makes complete sense for this to be the B-side of the Speed and Sound single, because it's basically Speed and Sound, but more melancholy and more intense in a very, very cool way. Like structurally, it's very similar. I'm actually not so big of a fan of the verses. I think they're okay. They're interesting enough, but they're just kind of boring and floaty after you've heard it once. But the thing that really, really makes this song stand out is the sounds of the of the chorus, because just like Speed of Sound's pre-chorus, it drops into this more intense, more plaintive space that's so intense in a very cool way. especially with these you know, panned pairs of vocals like filling in the space around Martin delivering the main line of the chorus. It's just so involved and so rich of a sound that I can't help but putting this song this far up. Number 51, Crest of Waves from the Clock single. This is a very stylistically plain song, I'd say, compared to the rest of the album, especially compared to Clocks, which it's all the better for, honestly. This is another Coldplay song where the verse feels like it just sort of exists because there needs to be a contrasting section against the intensity of the chorus and the bridge for it to work. But the chorus and the bridge here really sell it. That main guitar riff going through the whole song, crazy beautiful. And the way like Martin's voice like soars over it is so cool and so rich. And then the intensity is just lifted up another whole notch during the bridge with him like harmonizing with himself in this very, I keep saying plaintive because I mean, that's what it is. I need to look up some synonyms. In this very rich way. Desperate's the word I'm looking for. In this very desperate way that just really sells the whole song. Number 50, Brothers and Sisters from the Brothers and Sisters single and the Trouble single. This song comes like right out of the gate with this very intense, very cool riff that continues throughout most of the song. Martin's voice is really interesting here because he's still in this like low, serious baritone register that hasn't really like warmed up and moved higher yet, which kind of actually works in his favor on this song. And there's not really much I can say about this one. Besides, it's a really good song throughout, very good energy, and then the solo at the end with the inclusion of the wah pedal probably makes it one of the like best, in my opinion, solos in a Coldplay song in general. Number 49, Major Minus from Milo Xyloto. This song definitely nails the sort of bluesy driven stomp that Arabesque was going for, with a lot more energy, a lot more success, and a lot more immediacy. That's definitely, as well as that, the sound of Martin's vocals and the processing on them, along with the strength of the melody, really sells the sort of dark, Orwellian, I guess is the word, intensity that they're going for in this one. The only part of the song I didn't really like is the small ambient bit towards the end before it like kicks back into the chorus with like heavy lead guitar, because that section's a bit boring, but I get why it needed to be there so that the last chorus feels big. Number 48, Atlas. This was from the Hunger Games Catching Fire soundtrack, and I think its presence there lended itself to Coldplay writing a more melancholy and expressive song, which I feel like Chris Martin, for some reason, doesn't do very often. This shows that he's really good at it. Honestly, the verses on this thing they rank among some of the best Coldplay verses ever, I'd say, because it's just got this very simple melodic figure being moved around over chord changes. But the chord changes and the piano playing specifically are so rich, so beautiful. Honestly, very much an experiment compared to the rest of Coldplay's discography in a very good way. Unfortunately, that beauty is dragged down a little bit by the overproduction of the chorus, the Carry Your World chorus, which feels like it's blown up a little bigger than it needs to be. And then towards the end of the song, they introduce this like unprocessed almost drum kit, which kills the energy they were building. So great verses get sort of muddy towards the end. Number 47, Hypnotized from the Hypnotized single. This is one of the few tracks, I think, from this era of Coldplay that I would not actually call overproduced. Like, it's very produced, but that production is so dense and so rich over this long, slow build that it really makes the whole thing come together into this very sweet, beautiful package. The piano line is very pretty, but the steel guitar backing is what sells me, because obviously, like steel slide guitar, I'm a sucker for it. But I do love where this song builds to, especially towards the end where he gets into these very soaring vocal lines. It feels like the completion of this whole 5-minute thing, which is very rewarding and very pleasant. Only criticism, really, like everything else in this area, it's compressed. The mix is just sort of crushed and sausaged. Number 46, Aliens, with the letters all spaced out, from the Kaleidoscope EP. Hands down, one of the best, I'd say, Coldplay compositions of all time. The 5/4 rhythm that carries out through the whole song both propels the song forward, like generating this cool interest and cool like misstep groove, and at the same time it really secures and reflects the main message of the song about being in a foreign land, about not feeling like you're at home, because it never really settles because of the back and forth with the shifting beats. And on top of that, the production is so lush, so beautiful. There's this very alien sounding, what I have to assume is a weirdly processed electric guitar line that feels sort of like an alien's cry. And on top of that, there's these really cool string motions going on. Like I think after like the first verse, like shifting around, and then they come in very lush towards the end. And that really helps that, along with the cool rhythm section and the sound of the warm acoustic guitar coming in under Chris Martin midway through the song, really secures this dark, serious mood that feels like it's actually really respecting and reflecting the gravity of the subject matter. So if I have all this praise about this song, why is it only at 46? The mix and the master. Way too heavy in the low end, compressed to shit again. There's so much from this era that I would come back to and listen to over and over again if the mix was balanced right and the master wasn't smashed. It's infuriating what they did to some of these songs. It's so bad. It just kills what would otherwise be one of their best songs. Number 45, Chinese Sleep Chant from Viva La Vida. Very interesting thing. This is like a lone star in Coldplay's discography, honestly, because of just how, I'd say, dense and almost shapeless it is. It's just this very dense texture of what I think are like shoegazy guitars of rhythm section, and this really interesting synth noise that sort of whooshes into the song, just sitting on the 6 chord in this interesting back and forth. And this is like the only example I can think of them using Chris Martin's voice as an instrument instead of just the lead, because it fades into the texture when he's singing Sleep in this very simple descending melody. It coalesces into this like glowing thing that just whooshes over you and feels so cool to listen to. Number 44, Life is for Living from Parachutes. This is the hidden track that plays at the end of Everything's Not Lost, so this is technically the closer. And surprisingly, it makes, I think, a more fitting closer for an album than Everything's Not Lost, which I think is one of Coldplay's best songs. Because it's just this very slow, shuffling, like 3/4 guitar song at first, with like this really compressed, tinny mix. But then it widens out into this shuffle with this rich, dense organ texture over this beautiful plaintive melody. Almost moves me to tears, to be quite honest, at the end of the album. I kind of rank this in a trilogy of songs, which is like Radiohead's motion picture soundtrack, this song, and then Hamburg Song by Keane, which should probably be lower than that. Just songs that are sort of slow, post-Brit pop songs with a thick organ texture. Because they seem to go together well. My only complaint is, I have two. The way his vocals are on the texture bit is not. He flips into falsetto in a way that sort of feels not out of a stylistic choice, but out of a pained necessity almost. Like he can't really lift it that much higher. And the way the song ends, something about the descending motion of the organ chords just feels like it just sort of drops out instead of like ending. Number 43, Adventure of a Lifetime from A Head Full of Dreams. This was like the song of the summer 2015. Like I heard this everywhere. And even though I heard it everywhere, I didn't really ever get tired of it, surprisingly. That lead guitar line is so cool. It's such just a fast, cool texture thing going on. And the song itself is it's got a very cool groove underpinned by this classic disco-y bass line, but the melody is really good on its own and very like snappy in a propulsive way. Also, I'm a sucker for the parts right before the chorus where like there's a low pass filter, and I think that's just a very cool sound. Ultimately, it's just a fantastically composed song with just enough like darkness in it to keep it grooving and going forward. My only real complaint about this is that the compression starts to strangle the mix at the end of the song, especially with the call and response vocal bits. It feels like it starts to get strangled, but it's still a fantastic song. Number 42, Guns from Everyday Life. A very quick bluesy romp thing going on the guitar with Martin singing over it. This is one of the few Coldplay songs where he actually sounds like angry and invested in the material in a really interesting way, which really ends up selling the whole thing. But overall, even with that, I still think the composition is great. I think the bluesiness of the melody and his delivery of it too is really cool in the verses, and I love the way the chorus melody just soars over the whole thing. It's kind of short, not too much to it, but it's still very powerful and very much a strong song. Number 41, The Gold Rush, which is the B-side from Life in Technicolor 2. This is very much the sound of a band just having fun, having a nice time in the studio, which I think is a little constructed, obviously, because they left in the sound of like the whole band talking towards the beginning, which it helps to the energy. But very sweetly, this song, a lot of the vocal parts are just like a bunch of people just singing along together over this very, plodding but sweet piano rhythm that goes back and forth. A lot of the verses sound like they would be like a Lindsey Buckingham composition off of Tusk, in that they feel like structurally weird, very upbeat, very much like a happy blues sort of thing going on. The reason the song is up so high is just because it feels so sweet and warm because of the way it just feels like the whole band is just having a great time. Number 40, True Love from Ghost Stories. I did not think I was going to like this one nearly as much as I do, but because it's got a very mainline, pops thing going on with the production, but it works really well on this thing. There's like a bit crushed pizzicato synth thing going on in this ongoing rhythm, along with these dense sweeping strings that carry through the entire mix. And then the one thing that I think really sells this song and gets the melancholy through is the repeated use of the minor 5 in the verses, because it injects this plaintive, crying darkness into the song, which really fits the, if you love me, or if you don't love me, then lie to me message of the song. This like desperation to feel something positive that really sells the intensity of the song. I really love it. Number 39, Cry, Cry, Cry from Everyday Life. Very interesting texture thing here going on. This whole song is just like a lo-fi track that's got like the 60s piano sound going on. It sounds like it was just a song written on top of a lo-fi track, but it's got this like 3/4 shuffle groove thing going on. It's very sweet. This also has chipmunked vocals on it, but they work better here because they're not really left alone for as long, and a lot of the verses vocals are like lower, like harmonically, so the chipmunking sound isn't as like shrill. On top of that, it's just a really pretty melody, especially when it starts like rising in the I guess the bridge. And Jacob Collier is on this one. His vocals are so warm when he's doing like his trademark doom 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 thing, like going up in the bridge as well. He lends this really pretty warmth to this song that was already big and nice and warm, but it just feels like a blanket wrapped around you. It's so pleasant. Number 38, Parachutes from Parachutes. It's just a really, really pretty interlude. I love the sort of descending guitar motif, especially with the vocal line over it, which is so pretty. It's one of those few vocal lines that I think could just like sit on its own and be like listenable, which is really impressive. Only complaint is that it's a 50-second song. Number 37, Daylight from A Rush of Blood to the Head. This is functionally the same song as God Put a Smile Upon Your Face. Like, it's even got a very similar structure, in that it's got more menacing, ominous, laid back, not laid back, but like sneaky verses into a more expressive and desperate sound in the choruses. The primary difference is that this is a piano-based song, and because of it, you get this cool, moody, explorative piano motion, especially in the chorus, which I think makes the song stand out on its own right, and just sounds very, very cool. I don't like the ending bit where he starts repeating, slowly breaking through the daylight, like a mantra. It gets kind of boring and kind of grating, especially when it just fades out instead of ending with tact. But besides that, it's a pretty cool song. Number 36, Strawberry Swing from Viva La Vida. This song is hopelessly lovesick and sweet. It's so pretty, so almost cloying, but it feels spacey enough, especially because of the beauty of that reverb reversed guitar line, that it manages to balance that sweetness properly, so it never feels like sickening. It's just so intensely sweet and loving. The vocals the vocal melody, especially in the chorus, is really pretty, especially when he's like switching up into that falsetto. And the "It's such a perfect day" is so... It's so pretty and sweet. The song gets a little tedious towards the end, but then it comes in with a more inventive coda that feels really dreamy, just like laying down on a bed of grass on a summer day. It's very sweet. Number 35, Sparks from Parachutes. Like Strawberry Swing before it, it's so... It's got a different kind of sweetness. It's got, a late night or a coffee house sort of, like, not quite melancholy. It's got a very peaceful and mellow sort of sway to it and sweetness that is definitely aided by the beauty of the acoustic guitar chords. Like, the chords on this are really pretty. Along with the way the vibraphone, I think it is, or glockenspiel, comes in over the pre-choruses, I think, really sells this cloying sweetness that's very warm and pretty. Especially the ending is so beautiful. The "I saw sparks" motif that he repeats a couple times and then goes into like a very warm la la las, which one of the few times in their discography that I actually like them doing a sort of wordless chorus like that. The song is just, the only issue with it is that he's vocal frying a lot, and that starts to get grating by the end. Number 34, Yes, from Viva La Vida. I'm a big fan of the very Spanish flair that this thing has going on, coupled with this sort of bluesy feel. It's a really interesting mix of texture that works really well, especially when you've got Chris Martin singing in his lower range with a sort of confidence and a gravity that you don't really get in a lot of Coldplay after their like first album came out. Very cool sounds. Sometimes the string sections sound like they're clashing with the bluesiness, but ultimately that's overpowered by the strength of the composition, especially when he's like singing higher up in the second verse. Like the change in melody is so cool and gripping. And the chorus is very, very, very cool and slick in a really intense way that you don't usually get from Coldplay. Number 33, Oceans from Ghost Stories. Despite the interesting harmonic choices of this composition, I think without the production it would just be a curio, a mildly interesting song that doesn't really go anywhere. But the production is so very deliberate and cool. I love the returning at the beginning of like each bar. I love at the beginning of each bar the return of this like siren-y, sonar-y beep that makes you feel sort of lost in an ocean, like the song is titled. And then along with that, the strings on this are so beautiful, well written, deliberately composed, perfectly complementing the melody and the guitar part. The only thing that stops us from being even higher is, again, the composition. While it makes interesting choices, the melody is kind of forgettable, and Martin's vocal performance isn't the best. It's passable. I also have really nothing to say about the ambient thing at the end of the song. It just feels disjointed. Number 32, I Ran Away from the Scientist single. This song has a weird exchange going on. I still am not a big fan of the verses at all, because it's got this sort of washed out, spacey guitar line going on that isn't particularly interesting or grabbing to listen to because of the way it feels so distant and back in the mix. But as soon as you get to the chorus, the backness, the way the guitar is like back in the mix, actually makes the whole thing sound so rich and expansive when the drums pick up more, bass comes in, and these thick vocal harmonies are like coming in. This beautiful vocal line over these very sweet chord changes. It's one of the coolest choruses that I think Coldplay has, especially when it comes in towards the end with a better intensity. It's such a weird exchange to have the choruses get this huge, intense energy at the expense of the verses. Number 31, Up in Flames from Milo Xyloto. This is a really good marriage of Coldplay's classic sort of sad, weepy, ballady sound on the piano with the new sound of Milo Xyloto. Specifically, I think the piano and vocal structure works really well with the sparseness of those like thick 808 kits that really pin down the arrangement in a cool way. And the best part of the song ultimately is just the strength of the vocal line, especially in chorus. The Up in Flames melody is so beautiful. The only thing I didn't really like about the song was I feel like the guitar lines that come in towards the end felt a little shoehorned, like they didn't need to be there, but it's not enough to stop the song from being pretty fantastic. Number 30, Spies from Parachutes. There was a time where this was absolutely my favorite ever Coldplay song, like way back in like, I'd have to say like 2012 almost, like that far back. It's still a very good song, very slinky. It's got this sort of otherworldly almost energy, this like apocalyptic energy to it, or post-apocalyptic energy to it, that just sort of slinks around because of the the subject matter, but also the spaciness of that like almost string instrument like lead guitar that sort of pads out over the entire thing. I'm not as big of a fan of the sort of rompy way that the song picks up during the choruses after he sings "They're All Spies." That kind of wears on me a bit, but the strength of that and the strength of the verses, and the strength of the bridge section where it grows really intense with thick vocal harmonies, is enough to really sell the song on its own. I do not like the way the bridge clips, which is something I didn't notice, and by the end of the song, every time Martin sings "They're All Spies" in his high falsetto, it gets a little reedy and annoying. But ultimately, the song is really interesting and has a very cool groove throughout. It's the last day I'm going to film this video. It has to be up by midnight. Number 29, For You from the Shiver single. I think the song is just two chords back and forth. It's a really simple structure to it. Just sort of sits on this vamp for a while with this, at first, a very pretty piano melody, and then an equally pretty vocal melody. The two things that really sell this song are the beauty of, I'd say, the melody in the, I'd call it a chorus, I guess. It's just a wordless thing that Martin sings very gently over the entirety of the chorus. And on top of that, the production is what really sells it. The piano part is really beautifully played, and the drums are very understated, which gives it this very dreamy feeling. But the component that ties that feeling all together is the ambient-ish guitar track that sort of sits on top of the whole mix. It does these really pretty emotive slides, quiet tremolo picking at some points. It just culminates in this very sweet, dream-like sound. Number 28, Sleeping Sun from the Talk single. It's a really charming track. It just sort of sits in two places, where it's in this sort of Mixolydian just vamp on the one chord, and then there's a 4-chord sequence that it switches to for what I guess you would call the verse of this song. But all the way through, it's got this very sweet, bouncy energy that carries it through the entirety of the song. The melodies in the verse are pretty. But the really nice melodies are, once again, when Chris Martin is just sort of singing wordlessly over these piano figures that are just following what he's doing as well. The production on this thing is really dense in a very cool way. It never sounds crowded, but it sounds very dense and colorful, which manages to, I think, elevate the sort of uplifting, bouncy vibe of this song to a more ecstatic place. Number 27, What If from X and Y. It's a really, really sappy song, but like in all honesty, it's so well constructed and pretty that it being really sappy actually works in its favor. it manages to use the beauty of its own composition to actually, support the sadness, saccharines of the bittersweetness of the song that it's trying to put across. At its core is a really solid melody, especially in the pre-choruses, the when he moves higher up with the what if figure. And of course, he, as you would expect from a Coldplay song, he moves into high falsetto, sort of soaring emotional peak during the choruses. The strings on this one are really beautiful, especially towards the end, where you get two separate, really interesting codas, where there's, I think, two choruses back to back towards the end of the song. Once it's broken into this big drum and guitar, huge ballad space, where the first time it happens, you sit on, I don't even know what chord that would be in relation to the song's key, but you get this sort of descending line for like 4 bars. And then at the end, you get this really intense, interesting, driving sound. It's almost like the end of a day in the life, because it's just this rising swell of strings over this rooted bass line. It feels like it's just crashing and growing and swelling like a wave. That really manages to close off the song with a huge energy. Number 26, God Put a Smile Upon Your Face, from A Rush of Blood to the Head and the God Put a Smile Upon Your Face single. Again, very similar song to Daylight, except what I think I like more about this one is the way that the guitar, the acoustic guitar focus, accentuates the bluesiness of what he's trying to do here. The verses are very static with this descending acoustic guitar motif, but the bass stays on the same note, and you just sort of have to listen to his very bluesy melody going through. And then, like Daylight, it expands into this big, more emotive, more swelling part in the choruses, where he's got a more dramatic melody. Towards the end, it's got you build up on the verse section in a new, more intense way. Basically, everything that applies to Daylight is true here. I just think the mood is more cohesive, and ultimately it's just more pleasant of a song because of that. Number 25, Shiver, from Parachutes and from the Shiver single. This one is really sold on the strength of its main riff, I think. Like that main riff's huge energy is enough to drive you through the rest of the song. But that's not to say the rest of the song is bad, because it's really not. If I had to break this song up, there's like a main verse and then like 2 pre-choruses, which I really admire in a song. When you've got enough material to fill out the verses in more interesting ways, so it's just not A, B, A, B all the way through. Huge props to that, because that's so difficult. Especially because all the sections feel properly connected. If I had to split this up, I'd say the main verse section is this slow shuffling, foot staring, oh, you never see me, I'm invisible to you sort of sappy thing. And then you've got that, but with the stakes elevated, with the introduction of an echoey electric guitar, and more like this 2/5 motion going on. You build up into the more intense, more desperate, minor sounding other pre-chorus section before you explode into the main Shiver riff, and Martin is just singing Shiver in his falsetto voice, coasting over the top of this thing. And the thing that really cements the quality in this song, in my opinion, is how they handle the ending, because it's very cool. Right at the beginning of the song, you have this little 3-note ascending motif that comes in before you crash into the main Shiver riff. That repeats, except now it's over changing harmony, and he's singing I'll Always Be Waiting for You, and then it explodes into the last chorus, and he's got a totally new chorus melody with elevated lyrical stakes. It really takes the elements of the song and hones them together into this huge closer. Number 24, High Speed, from Parachutes and the Blue Room EP. This would just sort of be a really good, solid composition, nothing special, if it weren't for the production on this track, which really elevates it to a new level. It's got the most vibe, I'd say, out of any Coldplay song that I could name. just because of the way these keys, the spacey delays that are going on, these weaving guitar melodies, the shuffle of the drums, and even Martin's delivery. Like, he had a more tired voice in this era, and it really sells the laid back vibe of this song. It hangs out on this sort of mildly sinister, shuffle thing going on with these uneven bars that give you, little bits of interest throughout. And it builds into this very cool, slick chorus where he hits this high note right at the end that feels like sort of a pop of propulsion. It's just a song that very much coasts, but you can't help but follow the slickness of its current. Number 23, The Scientist from A Rush of Blood to the Head and the Scientist single. You don't need me to tell you that this song is pretty melodically beautiful and very sweet. It's I'd call it the quintessential example of the weepy, sad Coldplay ballad, but it does it really well, I'd say. Obviously, the piano playing is really beautiful, really plaintive, and that fits the melody that he's got going over it. It's hard to analyze what really makes this melody beautiful, because it's kind of repetitive throughout the whole song. But it never really feels boring, I'd say. And then there's some really pretty strings that swell up with it. The most beautiful part of it, I'd say, is definitely the ending, where the other guitar comes in, and the drums come in, and the strings swell up to this bigger climax, and he's singing this really beautiful, plaintive, wordless melody that sounds like the actualization of what Coldplay is usually going for in this sort of weepy ballad. Like, it affects a true loneliness that few Coldplay songs ever actually get to express. Number 22, Easy to Please from the Brothers and Sisters single. This is kind of bewildering. Out of all the vibes I would ever expect Coldplay to achieve or even try for, dismal end-of-the-world, given-up melancholy is not one that I expected to hear. And they pull it off on this one. It's really surprising. I mean, first off, the composition is really beautiful, sad, plaintive, and the fragility of Martin's voice from this period, usually it sort of kills the song. But in this one, it elevates the total wreckage feeling of the song up to another level of piercing intensity. And then on top of that, the production is what absolutely sells this song. Throughout the entirety of it, it feels like it's going on in this, like, burned down subway station or something like that. I mean, obviously, because there's, like, samples of distant talking layered over it. Whole thing has this sort of reverby air over it. There's these, like, almost like horror game pads fading in with this sort of eerie emptiness to them. There's a part where there's like a tremoloed guitar that fades in, and on top of that, there's this spacey single high-up piano line that just sort of traces out this sort of fractured melody thing going on, this arpeggiated run. The whole thing just sounds burned and hollowed out. It reminds me of... There's a song that'll play on the radios, I think, in Half-Life 2 that evokes a similar feeling. I think it's called, like, Haunted Trumpets or something like that. Of just everything's gone wrong. Nothing could ever be good again. Hopelessness. Number 21, Glass of Water from the Prospects March EP. Huge energy on this one. Really pretty. It starts out with these, like, interweaving trebly guitar lines atop this sort of infectious melody that Martin's singing. And it explodes into what is surprisingly a chorus in 7/8 with this huge, heavy, not quite heavy, but thick and dense sound, wall of sound, like rushing over you, that Martin soars over top of with his vocals. Usually I don't talk about the lyrics very much in Coldplay songs because they're usually bland or vague or just sort of like, I love you, you know. This one's pretty interesting lyrically as well. It's about like not trying to predict your future too much, and I have to give it credit for having interesting, at least pleasant vocals or lyrics up until I'd say the end. There's like a couplet at the end where he sings, "What are we drinking when we're done? Glasses of water." Cheesy line, didn't need to be there. But ultimately, this song is so rich and thick and propulsive that it's just so uplifting because of it. It feels sort of like being strapped to the front of a rocket ship. It's very very intense. Number 20, Violet Hill from Viva La Vida and the Violet Hill single. This song is similar in texture, I'd say, to Yes, but it forgoes the Spanish influence and also loses the sort of, sly, slicked back bluesiness that's going on in Yes that I felt was a little, it was a little camp in a way. That's completely gone here, and you get this very sincere heaviness, this real weight to the proceedings that's especially helped by between every couple lines of the verse. There's this like downward rhythmic stomp that really like hammers down the texture. The melody in the verses, the rhythm is the big focus of the melody there, I'd say. But the way it breaks out from this like heavily amped low vocal place into this choir-like soaring falsetto melody that really like drives home the point of the song. It's explosive, and it comes out of nowhere, and it hits you with this serious power. And the one thing I will always give Chris Martin credit for is when he wants to, he can write a beautiful piano accompaniment to a melody, which he does at the end of the song, where he takes the melody, shifts around the phrasing and the bar length a bit, and plays this really heart-wrenching solo piano bit along with this new melody that he's singing that wraps up the song, taking it from this huge, sinister, foreboding place into this pensive beauty. Number 19, Christmas Lights from the Christmas Lights single. If there's one thing that I would use to describe a lot of Coldplay music, it's saccharine, and that is exactly what Christmas is for musically. The lyrics at the beginning of this thing sound like a Hallmark movie almost. I think it's Christmas night, another fight, tears we cry in a flood, which is like, you couldn't get more simple than that. But the piano under it is pretty. The melody is fine enough, and it's got this sort of slow 4/4 build. But the thing it reaches in the end is so interesting because it completely drops the tempo and the time signature and shifts into this 3/4 or 6/8, like happy, Christmassy sway with this new melody that's soaring and powerful and beautiful. Very Auld Lang Syne, if I had to give it a specific point of reference. But it breaks into this huge, infectious, sweet energy that just, it feels like a real Christmas song. It's so sweet and up-looking. Number 18, Trouble in Town from Everyday Life. Probably one of the few, I'd say, lyrically powerful and even relevant Coldplay songs to ever come out, honestly. I mean, first of all, the palette at the beginning has this sort of very muted, dour, but still slightly grooving flow to it that's really engrossing and gripping. And Martin's melodies over it are very pretty. The choruses especially are... I should get it out of the way, the song's about police brutality. The chorus melody and the lyrics that he sings over the choruses is so interesting and affecting. Like, I think the last chorus before it goes towards the end of the song is like, and I get no justice and I get no peace and I just get more police. Like powerful lyrics, especially for Coldplay, who's usually so middle of the road and unaffected by anything. And then it goes into this sample, which I usually disapprove of on a Coldplay song because it feels preachy, but this time it doesn't, of a traffic stop in, I believe, Philadelphia from 2015. Where this guy gets like wrongfully arrested by this asshole cop, and it's from there, as that encounter gets heated, the song picks up into this huge, powerful, grooving space this dark groove that is so propulsive, especially with this dense pad sound that like revs up into the song, and this actually emotionally powerful guitar solo, which is something you never expect from Coldplay. It's a real hard punch of a song, and I feel like it executes what it wanted to execute really perfectly. Number 17, Yellow from Parachutes and the Yellow single. Like, what can I tell you about this song? If you are watching this video, you've heard Yellow before. You know about it. I mean, after all this time as a song, as a single, it still holds up, and it has a lot of the same post-Britpop sappy power to it that it had back then. From the beginning, this song shows that Chris Martin understood the effect of uneven verse or bar structure to create sort of a propulsion through what would otherwise be a sort of standard verse section. Because the verses here are like patterns of 6 bars, which is very cool. And then, of course, it explodes into this huge chorus where he's like singing in falsetto, and there's echoey guitar. And I think cello comes in. There's a whole chorus of oohs surrounding him that's like this sweet, sugary firework. Yeah, it's the only complaint that I have is that the mix isn't really great on this one. It never was, I guess, but that doesn't stop it from being a really powerful, classic, sweet ballad of a song. Number 16, Trouble from Parachutes and the Trouble single. This one is really carried on the interest of its composition at its core. Like the piano part and the verse melody is what really sell this song completely. It starts out in this, I'd say, pretty simple minor place with this interesting piano riff, but the harmony in the verses is so weird. It like steps out of the minor key it's in into this strange major place before it's sinking back in to the minor place in this sort of tug of war of feeling that's only, I'd say, accentuated by the beauty of Martin's sort of weaving vocal line that goes over this whole thing. It's the production is Parachutes. It's very sweet, very dense, very, you know, slidey guitar focused, and the distinctly Mixolydian 1/5 that it gets into in the more soaring, open, solid choruses is very cool. The only thing that really holds the chorus back is at the end he goes, "Oh no, I never meant to do you harm." You heard my voice crack just there? It's because he flips into a falsetto. He does it too, I'd say a little worse even. And that sort of kills a bit of the charm. But otherwise, the composition is super solid. Number 15, A Rush of Blood to the Head from A Rush of Blood to the Head. This one is also sort of in the vein of God Put a Smile Upon Your Face and Daylight, in that it's got sort of muted verses that burst into a big, more expressive chorus and back and forth. And at the end, there's a bit of change on the structure of the A section. I guess this was just a particular favorite format of Martin at the time for songwriting. But this is, I think, the one that pulls it off. This pulls it off really well. And a lot of that comes down to the strength of the melody and the way that it keeps the mood going throughout the entire song. Obviously, the verse melody is soaring and very cool. But the thing that I'd say really sells the song for me is the sense of space that you get from the reversed guitar, which usually I'm not a big fan of in a song. I feel like it's a bit dated, a bit cheesy, but it works really well here to create this sort of spacey vibe going on that's got this that gives way into this like upward slide in the guitar that just rockets you into the chorus. The harmony in the choruses is also very cool because at the end there's this like downturn into this moody place that I don't know really how I would describe harmonically without getting out a keyboard and figuring it out. But it's very cool. Especially another thing that it does that I really like is the way the notes of the verses are different. Like the rhythms are the same, but in the second verse, the notes are like higher up and more intense. So it feels like you're getting this build, but with the same structure, which is a lot for consistency. And then I think you get that too at the end, even. yeah, it's just a very, very solid song with this very good sense of mood and space. Number 14, Square One from X and Y. I would call this, I call this in my notes like the first danceable song of their career, which I hold to that. Like the beat is infectious, the groove that this thing has is very cool. And as the first single off X and Y, the production is the first thing I think that really grabs you, because you open in this sort of ambient reverse sound space that's so cool in a new way, but it still feels Coldplay-ish. And then the second verse really is sort of this tug and war call and response between Chris Martin and these interesting production samples, which normally I would think would make for a disjointed song, but something about the way it's done, it all holds together into this very colorful frame, which is a very, very cool texture thing. The choruses are very cool, like the way it hangs on like a dominant sort of sound towards the end of the choruses, along with this soaring vocal pattern. And the element that I really, really like about the choruses that I think only comes in the last one is throughout all of them, towards the end of the chorus, you've got this descending guitar line. But in the last one, you have a counter line in what sounds like a really heavily processed vocal sample, just arpeggiating up a row of four tones, which really elevates you to this cool, dense energy. And as well, you get this sort of weepy, slow downer outer, which feels sort of like stepping out of a dance club into a more open space with this reverse guitar, where Martin is very plaintive, singing a new melody over just an acoustic guitar. And it really beautifully concludes the whole thing. Number 13, Up With the Birds from Milo Xyloto. Well, I do have to say that this song fits into the trend that I've sort of maligned throughout, of a Coldplay closer that starts in a gentle, open space and crescendos into a big, uplifting stadium thing. This song does it really well. The thing I have to note the most about this song is the first half is my favorite by far, because it's just got this sort of free time, sad, beautiful, like beginning of a new hope sort of feeling, with just Chris Martin on vocals and then this soft piano line. But it coalesces into this beautiful texture that I wasn't expecting. I've said that Milo Xyloto is very much like a sort of dense candy mush of an album. This feels like you're just swirling in a sea of sugar that's completely lifted you off your feet, because this dense, thick texture, it just sort of washes over you once he gets to what is, for this section, the chorus, and he's singing a very melancholic melody over it. It like sweeps you away in this crazy way that I would never have expected from a Coldplay song. It's pure beauty. And then from there you go into this soft ambient texture that leads into a acoustic guitar section that sort of, does the predictable Coldplay thing of steadily building up to this big finale. But even this section is well composed, sweeter than normal, I think, which is the motif for the whole album, is just sweeter than normal Coldplay, because the ending vocal melody, very pretty. The build is richer and more colorful than normal for a Coldplay song of this caliber. But yeah, the sudden textural shift, and the beauty of that first section is what really cements this song as great. Number 12, Prospects March / Poppy Fields from the Prospects March EP. This starts out as this very, very pretty, very simple guitar texture with Chris Martin singing over it, this sort of languid tune about the desolation of what I assume is some sort of town or encampment. His voice and the melody together sound sort of devastated in a really direct way, and then once it gets to sort of the end of this more simple section, it decides to expand outward into this very pretty, richer, more ambient section that takes the harmony in a more beautiful, slowly still building, soaring direction. Especially when he sings the line, "Oh, and I run," his voice soars with a power that you don't usually hear in a Coldplay song, and you've got this very pretty harmony going on, this soft, expansive pad feeling. And then from there, it moves into a gentle, drifty section where he's singing about lying under the sky. So you've gone from this very tragic build into this more emotive recollection into a dreamier space, all within the short runtime of this through composed song. It evokes a beauty, a very delicate beauty that you don't really get in a lot of Coldplay songs, and that's what makes it so unique and so beautiful. And then, assuming that Poppy Fields is the name to the more ambient section at the end of the song, I'm usually not a fan of when Coldplay ends a song with an ambient piece, but here it actually works surprisingly well. I think it's composed of a simple guitar line that's been chopped up and mixed up a bit, but it feels like it directly stems from the core ideas of Prospects March. Number 11, Everything's Not Lost from Parachutes. This is the ostensible closer because there's a hidden track after it to the album, so it definitely fits the role of feeling conclusive, and it does fit the Coldplay mold of start quiet, build loud. But you start in these very beautiful, just Martin singing over these very pretty piano chords that sound like a sly grin from someone like completely like down on the ground. And you build from there with this sort of sweet shuffle, not sweet, but infectious shuffle, I'd have to say, with these swelling strings over it as you go through verse and chorus that have, there's no actual vocal melody in the chorus, I think, until the last one, but the sort of the distinct bluesiness of the vocal melody in the verses is very cool, especially when contrasted against the echoey U2-esque main guitar line in the chorus. And then at the final chorus, you get this huge, beautiful, like almost like a sort of group chant melody that definitely picks you up, feels like you get a crowd of people singing it in a room over this more exploratory harmony where you sort of lose the sly edge and move into a more genuine sort of expression of beauty place. Well, he's like dancing around in his falsetto in a surprisingly limber and lithe way that really ties the whole song together at the end. Number 10, 42 from Viva La Vida. This one is very cool. They I think said at the time of this album that they wanted to go in an art rock direction, and this song really evinces that in the way that it's through composed, which is not something you see Coldplay doing very often, and it's very cool. There's three distinct sections to this song. The first one is this very dour, sort of weepy, melancholy place that sort of drifts around with... It's ghost-like, which makes sense, because that seems to be a theme of the song, is ghosts. And he's singing about a curse or something, and it's not really... it's more about the imagery as you hang out in this distinctly dark place with these very sad strings over it. This almost like hopelessness space. And then from there you move into the B section, which is this dense driving riff with a cool guitar line going over it that surprisingly has a lot of intensity, which Coldplay very rarely manages to reach this sort of level of driving bluesy energy that feels like a lot of what they were going for on some of the songs from X and Y, but it nails it really intensely. And then to top that all off, there's the C section that it explodes into with piano and this more uplifting, it's like a 4-to-1 switch, and this really beautiful Thought You Might Be a Ghost melody from Chris Martin that sits atop the whole thing and feels like this jubilant outcry and celebration. And then right at the end, you step right back into the first line of the A section, but you don't actually finish that line out the same way to conclude the song. It's a very cool experiment from Coldplay, and one I wish they would take more often. Number 9, Twisted Logic from X and Y. This song has like this weird, ominous energy to it that's really propulsive and makes this, I think, one of the most successfully intense Coldplay songs that there is. And the thing I really admire about this composition is it very much feels like a bunch of individual pieces coming together, at least production-wise, into this more complete whole. And there's a lot of disparate elements to it, disparate melodies coursing through it that I like a lot. Like at the second half of, I think, the first verse, no, that'll be the second verse, you get this spacey, eroding guitar line sort of floating over it. Throughout most of the verses, you get this driving static bass line that just sort of sits on the one for a while. And you get this cool, echoey, expansive guitar riff that dances around Martin's vocal line in the chorus. Ultimately, this thing really succeeds as well in just maintaining this very ominous mood, which is definitely helped by the pre-chorus's sort of almost like classically dour space that it slinks into before erupting into the giant size of the flat 6, flat 7, 1, minor 5 chorus line that you get into, where once again Martin is like soaring vocally over it. And yeah, it comes together from all these disparate winding elements to build this huge intensity that crescendos right at the end, where you get this arpeggiated riff over the harmony of the chorus and these like thrashing drum lines with this loud, I don't think it's Chris Martin, but someone's like doing like a power metal yell almost over the end of the song that feels like it's getting like sidechained or dipped at the start of every bar. It's so intense and so gripping. Number 8, Help Is Just Around the Corner from Yellow single. It's honestly hard to talk about what I like about this song because that would require like a serious melodic analysis, I think. The song is so simple. I think in its entirety, it's just Chris Martin and a guitar, just over a verse, chorus, structure through. It's a very simple but very, very sweet, almost cloying song. I think the melody and the simplicity of the harmony that goes with it is what really sells it. Especially the come on, oh what a state I'm in line is really beautiful. And the way it sort of slinks back in a sort of resigned but still hopeful way, like holding out a hand to a friend in need, when he goes, "For us," is really pretty. I wish he did that line a little better because he doesn't clarify the notes a bit. So sometimes it just sounds like he's sort of falling into his vocal fry. But that is my real only complaint with the song. The way it hangs out on the sound of the 2, the major 2, and the simple 1-5 sound in the end of the choruses really carries the song throughout. It's just very well structured and totally simple. Number 7, I Bloom Blom from the In My Place single. This is by far the most harmonically interesting thing I think Coldplay has ever put out. Again, it's a very simple song, like Help Is Just Around the Corner, on the face of it, but there's only like 4 chords in the whole thing, and the chords that they choose are so interesting. I've tried to pick apart these chords on their own. It sounds like the chords are all sort of rooted, like the root notes fit into a D major tonality. They don't sit in D major. The first chord space I'd say that you sit on is like a D Lydian, and then you go to a G minor sound, which definitely doesn't fit. You go to the natural like A major, and then on the last chord you go to like the major 6, which is such a weird sound, and yet it effortlessly weaves between these very different tonal sounds, tonal centers, in a way that I've never heard before, even outside of Coldplay. It's almost like modal jazz in a way, which I feel weird comparing Coldplay to. But especially the way the melody just sounds completely natural over these strange chord changes. The melody never sounds like it's trying too hard to fit a strange key center. It's just almost effortless. It's so bewildering. I wish that Coldplay would do this sort of harmonic experiment a lot more often, because like Chris Martin's a capable composer, clearly. Like this shows it. Number 6, Warning Sign from A Rush of Blood to the Head. This one manages to affect a sort of run-down, authentic sort of sad desperation that Coldplay always strives to, but very rarely achieves. But this one manages to do it with the sort of loose-strung sounding sort of open guitar chords, along with this like back and forth reversed a guitar melody, which usually I think reverse guitar tends to be a sort of a cheap trick for, you know, a simple production sound. But the composition on this is also really solid. Their verse melody here is, you know, it's got longer phrases that sort of wind around a little bit, even though they follow the same sort of general shape, which I think works really well. The one part of it I don't really like is, I'd say, the first chorus, because he just sort of goes, "I miss you," and that's like the whole chorus. But even that gets paid off really nicely in the second chorus, where he goes into a more developed version of this melody that's more expressive, moves around in his head voice a bit more. And then at the end, you get this really beautiful section, probably the best part of the song, one of the highlights of the whole album, where it's just, it simplifies down to these piano chords, and he's singing "And I Crawl Back Into Your Open Arms" in this very soft way. And it feels so much like a genuine expression of love and want that it's very touching. Number 5, Milo Xyloto and "Hurts Like Heaven" from Milo Xyloto. So we're really getting into my like pure favorites here, and this one is definitely like a huge highlight. Again, it's hard to describe even, because this one, even more so than some of the ones that I pointed out earlier on the album, or just even down the list, feels like shellacking of all these. It's like exploding outwards with melodic ideas, beautiful melodic ideas, and new production little bits that coalesce into this huge, colorful mass, which is just like overflowing with life and energy. And it comes back to this like beautiful sort of chorus that's, or I guess that's the conclusion of the chorus, where he sings, "You use your heart like a weapon and it hurts like heaven." But dancing around it, you get these like mini sections almost of melodic ideas with huge rhythmic energy. There's my favorite like little melodic section in the whole song is the "Yes, I feel nervous, yes, I feel nervous and I cannot relax," where the beat sort of drops down, and you've just got this stacked chorus of auto-tuned Chris Martins over this soft synth, just smack dab in the middle of the verse, which is such a cool decision. It's the most recklessly creative I think Coldplay's ever been, and it's so beautiful and high energy. Number 4, "Moving to Mars" from the "Every Teardrop Is a Waterfall" single. It's honestly unbelievable that this song came out of Coldplay, because of how beautiful and rich and complex it is. I mean, I could spend like an hour alone on just the beginning piano section. Where to even start with this one? It starts out with this very low vocal part over this really harmonically interesting piano line. It affects such a strange mood that it's hard to even put into words. But it's beautiful. "Homesick" and "Alienated," I would have to say, are the spaces it puts me in. And then that swells up a bit as he says, heard it on a TV show that's somewhere up and above and in my heart. They'll be moving us to Mars," and his vocal soars. And then from there you drop into this alternate section in like a different key. That's this very, very rich. It feels sort of like, or a less dour version of the chorus from Space Oddity. I keep coming back to that as a point of reference for this song in particular, because it feels very much inspired by it in feel and in structure. But you drop into this very cool and open and warm middle section, and then after that part, we slide back into the structure, or the harmonic space and the melodic space of the original section, but this time it's bigger, and it's still continuing the build with this syrupy electric guitar, and you reach this huge crescendo with these horns coming in over Chris Martin singing "They'll Be Moving Us to Mars." And then at the end, it sort of fades into this beautiful, thick string chord that honestly gives me chills every time I listen to it. This song is an absolute experience, and I beg you to listen to it because it's amazing. Number 3, "Low" from X and Y. This, unlike a lot of Coldplay songs, manages to land a serious, intense gravity that you don't really expect from Coldplay in general, mostly because of the intensity and denseness of the production. There's these really thick string lines that are coupled with an almost shoegazy sort of guitar, I'd have to say, that does these like, it sounds like bends. I'm not necessarily sure if it is, because it could be slides, but this thick texture that dominates and powers through the entire choruses. As well, the melodies for the song are very, very hooky and syrupy. In the verses, you get this cool ambient reverse guitar sound that sort of bounces around while Chris Martin is singing. Melodically, the most interesting thing that happens in the main part of the song is he, at the end of, I think, the second chorus, he sings "You Should Try," elevating from the sort of middle of his range place that the vocals were in up into his like high register. This is where Chris Martin's tendency to flip into a falsetto, I think, pays off the most out of any song. There's he drops like an octave and a half between two notes at the end of it, which is a wild sound. It's so strange. The denseness of the choruses is so beautiful, so pretty, especially with the melody being doubled. And then at the end of the second chorus, it flips into this alternate chorus melody, which is even more beautiful and works along with the harmony in an even more interesting and intense and sweet way. And then the thing that really cements this as an amazing song is the end, where you drop into this Lydian drone almost section. It's not a drone all the way through because there are chord changes, but it sits on this Lydian chord while Chris Martin sings over this very dense soundscape that feels like you've taken the main part of the song, blown it up, spread it out into this huge expanse that has this irresistible intensity and it's a perfect conclusion to the intensity of the song to balance it out with this still intense but more spaced out section. Number 2, Viva la Vida from Viva la Vida. And like obviously this is one of the most enduring pop singles I'd say of the last 20 years. You don't need me to tell you that this song is beautiful, but what I can point out is just the strength of the melody and the beauty of the melodic patterns, especially that repeating figure in the chorus, that repeating rhythm that very much sells the song throughout. And the song is only elevated further by the beauty and denseness of the production, because you get these, you know, in the choruses when the timpani rolls and the church bells start coming in, that give the song this like classical flair, this beauty that highlights the emotional tale being unraveled. Again, one of the few Coldplay songs with lyrics that are not only just that are more than just the sort of vague standard love song that you get from Coldplay, but this tale of loss and falling from grace. And then the production is really what elevates it. I think I said already. There's so many beautiful snippets. There's this like post-chorus with this like echoey, spacey synthesizer that's one of my favorite sounds in any song ever, honestly. And the multi-track like that comes in towards I think the end of the second verse and fades the song out is beautiful. The song is a beautiful, perfect composition with such syrupy and gorgeous production that it's honestly one of, I'd say, the best songs ever. And finally, we are at number 1, which I say is my favorite Coldplay song, but honestly, any of the top 5 songs you could rearrange and put at number 1, and I'd still be happy with the list, honestly. I just, I had to pick something, and every time I thought about moving this song lower on the list, like down to maybe 3 or 4, something in me stopped me from doing it, so I decided, hey, I'll just leave this as my favorite song, because it's ultimately one of my favorites. Amsterdam, from A Rush of Blood to the Head. I feel like this is probably a bewildering choice for some people, especially people familiar with Coldplay's discography and the song, because it's a very understated song. It's the closer on A Rush of Blood to the Head. It's nowhere near as complex in composition as a song like Moving to Mars, or as in production in Viva la Vida, or as intense as a song like Low. But what this simple song does have is, I think, an enduring beauty to it that is touching all the more because of its simplicity. The majority of this song is just Chris Martin singing with a piano. Every melody in this thing is absolutely beautiful, especially the verse melodies, I think, and the vocals that sit atop and sit through this very plaintive melody. This song, honestly, I think it takes like 4 minutes to get to the big explosion at the end, which I think the song is all the better for, because it sits in this wistful, simple space that just lets the ideas sort of breathe, the beauty of the melodies, the change into the more expressive sound of the chorus melody, especially on the second verse, I should say, has the stacked sound of a chorus of Chris Martin's that accentuates and lifts the sorrow and plaintiveness of the main vocal line to a whole nother level of understated beauty. As it starts picking up and accelerating into the final, ending the big conclusion, you get this really beautiful, and this is just a little thing, but the organ comes in and you get this almost screeching guitar feedbacky sound that courses over top of the piano. And something about the tone of that sound is so affecting and powerful to me. And then, of course, it explodes into this huge rocking end section, which is the verse section's harmony with powerful guitar and Chris Martin winding himself up, working himself up until this big melodic explosion towards the end of the song that from there it hits its peak and it just slowly winds back down with the sound of the organ and slowly fades away. I say a lot of the time in this video that Coldplay is always trying for an emotion that they never hit, and this isn't the same emotion that they sometimes achieve. This is, I think, a true wistfulness and a feeling of looking back into a past that you're disconnected from, and that is what sets it above the rest of the songs. Alright, I'm finally done with this extremely long video essay. This has been killing me. I started this in September, and filming it has worn down my throat on several different days, this one included. If you did like this video, let me know if you'd be interested in me picking apart some of my favorite songs in a deeper analysis, specifically melodic and harmonic, to kind of figure out why some of these songs tick, why I like them so much. So if this video gets interest, or if you're interested in that at all, just let me know, because I'd be very happy to pick apart some of these songs. Concluding thoughts, Coldplay has this huge preceding reputation as a very middle-of-the-road band, and I think in a lot of ways that's deserved, because so much of what they end up putting out feels uninspired or pandering in certain ways, which is kind of bewildering and kind of disappointing to me, because there are a lot of occasions where Coldplay does their best to put out something truly artistic, truly beautiful, and they succeed when they do that. Chris Martin is a very capable composer. Everyone in the band is very talented. When Coldplay puts out a good song, it's not just a good song, it's an amazing song. The reason that I think I stay following Coldplay, and the reason I can't shake my love for some of their older records, even some of the songs that I heard more recently I really like, is because of that talent. Coldplay has, at times, an undeniable talent for creating beautiful, affecting music. And even though they don't necessarily do that all the time or even remotely consistently, when they do make good music, it's really good. I'm Ellie Fuzz, and thank you for watching.